Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Asuma and his pregnant wife Kurenai adopt a newborn Naruto and take him with them for his own safety. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. It's official, you've gone completely senile, old man. Sarutobi Hiruzen, Sandaime Hokage of Konoha no Sato, sighed wryly at his son's dry witty retort in response to his proposal. He expected as much considering the circumstances regarding their souring relationship. But even so, a man never becomes Hokage without skills in the art of diplomacy. Although he never expected these skills would be necessary to talk with his son. Asuma, as much as I enjoy hearing how you worry about my mental health, there's is still much more to discuss. And what do you mean there's more to discuss? Asuma interrupted with an even tone. You've literally had me dragged here to be blindsided with this request when you know what my situation is right now. The younger Sarutobi was clearly not thrilled with this talk. We literally had one foot out of the gate when he had his masked cronies pick us up. If it wasn't for Nai-chan calming me down, I wouldn't even be in this office right now. The elder Sarutobi rubbed his temple. Asuma, I know we haven't seen eye to eye lately, but can you please just hear me out before this becomes another pissing match? Have I really let you down this much, my son, that you were so adamant to leave without saying goodbye? Seems this job truly is a curse on the families of those who hold it. Despite being somewhat skeptical of the manipulative prowess of the veteran Hokage, the younger man decided this once to fully hear his father out. The second I think you're trying to pull any shenanigans, discussion over. You've got 5 minutes, old man, but remember, the second I think you're pulling a fast one, me and Nai-chan are heading to the daimyo's court double time and we're not looking back again. Said Asuma, crossing his arms while burning his gaze into his estranged father. Smiling sadly that his son thought this little of his sincerity, yet still decided to listen, he began. Son Asuma, I need you to take the boy, Naruto, with you out of Konoha. I heard you the first time, frustration evident in his voice, but you are still neglecting to tell me why. It has to be me of all people to take the squirt. Last time I checked, every clan from Aburam to Yamanaka have offered to adopt the boy. Said Asuma, throwing his arms around in a circle to emphasize his point. Rubbing the bridge of his nose in preparation of the coming headache, the third continued. I know, and they all sincerely wish to honor the wishes of the fourth to protect the boy. That's not the problem. You're losing me, Pop. Said Asuma, tapping his fingers against his crossed arms. What have you got up your sleeve, old man? Looking up to stare his son in the eye. The problem is, in the last week alone since the sealing of the fox, I've had to order the execution of 8 skilled leaf ninja that tried to slit Naruto's throat in his sleep. So? The bastards deserve to die for trying to kill a child. I don't see the problem. Said the younger man. Especially if it were up to me, I'd have gutted him personally with a spoon and a crazy straw. I see, even after all the boasting that you knew better than myself about how the world operates, your eyes still can't see the bigger picture. Muttered the Hokage with a look of haggard disappointment. If I knew you were going to lecture me again, Hokage-sama, spitting the last part out, I'd be out the door already with Kurenai heading for our new lives at the capital. Now get to the damn point. Shouted a now thoroughly pissed and indignant Sarutobi. Asuma still thinks he has the right to act like he's been a real father to me. This goddamn village came first always, while me, mom, and bro had to sit second string on his thing-to-do list. The point being is, if Naruto were to be adopted into a respectable clan within the village and offered protection, not only would Naruto still be in danger of continued attempts at his life, but I would also be forced to execute even more shinobi that I simply can't afford to lose with our forces already thinned from the Kyuubi's attack. Wearily responded the Sandaime, exasperated by the events of the past few weeks. He simply can't stay in the village, no matter who's protecting him. So you're trying to sweep this kid under the rug because you don't want to execute baby killers that still have you as leaf ninja. Is that what you're telling me? Because if it is, then I think this village is doomed, even if the damn fox is gone. Angrily laughed Asuma while shaking his head in disappointment. Damn it, boy. Don't you think I know that? The Hokage's tone catching Asuma off guard. The only reason I'm back in this infernal chair taking care of this forsaken place is so Minato's sacrifice and that of his son wasn't in vain. Sinking into his chair and looking every bit the 50+ years old he has lived, the Hokage looked back to his eldest child once again and noticed his surprised look. Wearily he clarified, yes, Naruto is Minato's legacy in more ways than one. I trust you can keep this secret, since it's enough trouble as it is with Konoha ninja trying to kill him, only to have to deal with Iwa Nin on top of it looking for retribution against his father. The Hokage, looking down sadly, continued. I know I haven't been much of a father to you or your brother, and I know for a fact it's far too late to make up for it, but this child won't survive here as long as the weak minds of the villagers continue like this. The elderly man's voice just barely above a whisper. Looking up to see his son's wide-eyed expression, he wearily continued, even I, a man too often blinded by his love for his village and its people, understands that it takes more than strict laws to squelch S-class secrets to change the hearts of men and women. These people are too self-righteous and stubborn to let the fear of execution stop them from killing an innocent child. Asuma, still a tad surprised to hear these words come from his father, responded, I can understand why you need to get the boy the hell out of this monster clusterfuck, but still, why trust me of all people to do this? Smiling at his son, he clarified, just because I've always tried to get you to question yourself and your views on different things, Asuma, doesn't mean I don't have faith and trust in you. Quite the opposite, in fact. Smiling wider at his son's even more shocked look by that praise, the Sandaime continued, yes, I could order someone else to take him out of the village as a mission and provide sterile protection, but I know in the end they would fail to do the one thing I would need them to do the most. Asuma, firmly interested in the answer, asked what would that be? Again staring straight into Asuma's eyes with a soft expression, he continued, giving the boy a loving family. Reeling from hearing his father declare such faith in him, the young man contemplated this task. His Hokage, no, his father asked of him. He really needed to weigh the options. This wasn't some run-of-the-mill request given on a whim. He knew Kurenai was firmly adamant about starting a family soon, and from his understanding, those in the court of the Fire Daimyo wouldn't be privy to the identity of the container for the nine-tailed fox, leaving Naruto safe from similar dangers like in Konoha. There was so much to take in all at once, but like all men, Asuma knew heavy decisions like these really came down to the approval his better half. After a few minutes of deep thought, Asuma looked back up to meet his father's eyes. Just so you know, I still think you've completely lost your mind, old man. Duly noted, said the third with a smirk. Well, regardless of that, I certainly wouldn't mind having a little squirt calling me Pops. But still, I'd like to get Nai-chan's input about this, since I don't think she was planning on diaper duty this quick. Chuckling, the elder Hokage responded, well, let's go find my lovely daughter-in-law then. Although speaking from experience, if you think you can push all the baby duty on her alone, expect many nights alone on the couch, my son. Especially with a wife with as much fire as your mother. With a shiver, Asuma retorted, thanks dad, real nice. I really need to know I married a woman like mom. Any more traumatic comparisons you got lined up? Laughing at his son's indignant look, the elder Sarutobi stood up, come on my boy, let's go find Kurenai and see what she thinks about this arrangement. After the two Sarutobis left the Hokage office, they asked a receptionist if she could point them in the direction where the Genjutsu mistress had slipped away. After a sly wink from the younger Sarutobi to the woman at the desk and a roll of said woman's eyes, the two headed toward the direction of the nursery where Kurenai was last seen entering. Stand down, captains. Ordered the Hokage to the two Anbu stationed at the door. With a quick yes sir from the Anbu and a muttered kiss asses from Asuma, they entered the room to a most unexpected sight. Sitting in a chair near a lone crib, sat Sarutobi Uchi Kurenai, lovingly holding and cooing a very loudly giggling baby Uzumaki Naruto. Not even aware of additional company in the room, Kurenai continued her assault of tickling the child's stomach, laughing herself at his response. The two male newcomers in the nursery smiled at the sight and exchanged a look that clearly said no point in asking now. Leaning to his son, the Hokage whispered, I'll take care of all the adoption paperwork and have some of my Anbu gather up Naruto's things for you. Then once the red tape is out of the way, you can set out before nightfall. Seeing that his son was still smiling at the scene before him, the Sandaime continued, for now though, go to them, my boy. The rest can wait. Turning to see his father's grandfatherly smile, Asuma nodded, and before his father left he said words he never thought he'd hear himself say. Thanks dad for the talk. Smiling and giving his son a thankful pat on the shoulder, the Sandaime left, allowing Asuma to head over to greet the new addition to his family. The old fart knew this would happen, I almost feel like he played me. But seeing this though, I know better than that. Thought Asuma as he edged behind his wife and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Slightly startled by the contact, the beautiful young raven-hair woman looked up and smiled, seeing her husband standing there with an amused yet warm smile on his face. I see I can't leave you alone for more than a half hour before you're off finding stray children to cuddle with. Joked the young man to his counterpart. Smirking back she said, you're just jealous because this little guy here is in my arms and not you. Mocking a shocked look, Asuma smirked back, well, if I knew we were having such an open relationship, I would have made my moves already. With a mischievous glint. I know Anko is pretty adventurous, and one more word, monkey boy, and you'll be finding new ways to smoke those death sticks without full use of your mouth. Mock growled his loving wife, pointing her finger in his face. Whoa, alright I give. Laughed the young man, waving his hand in surrender. Throughout the exchange the young Naruto was busy giggling and gurgling at the two's actions, as if it was the funniest thing in the world. Hey, help me out here, Squirt, your new old man needs some backup here. Smirking at the small baby, then refocusing on the puzzled look on Kurenai's face. Asuma-kun, did I just hear you right? Because if this is another joke it really isn't funny. said the young woman in a tone belying hope. Me and Dad had a little heart-to-heart and he asked me if I wanted to raise the half-pint here and take him with us to the capital. At first I thought he was trying to dump his burden of protecting the boy on me as his last big FU for taking the daimyo's offer. Looking down at the wide blue eyes of Naruto, he went on, then I realized this isn't about him and me and all the crap we've got going on. It's about a poor kid who won't get a chance to live a normal life because the needs of this stupid village outweighed his. A lone tear fell from his eye. I more than anybody else knows how it feels to have your needs thrown aside for that of this village, and I'll be damned if I let this little man grow up not knowing the love of a mom and dad. Looking back to the soft, tearing red eyes of Kurenai he smiled, and besides that, I love you way too much to let this opportunity to raise this child to slip by. Kurenai looking back down to the now sleeping Naruto replied softly, you know me too well Asuma-kun. Softly kissing the top of her head. And I wouldn't change a thing. The new family sat in the nursery in quiet silence for nearly an hour before Asuma decided to check and see if his father finalized the rest of their traveling papers and adoption write-ups. Kurenai decided to remain behind and gently laid a sleeping Naruto back down into his crib. Standing up and stretching out the kinks in her body and hearing Asuma's offhand comment of time to get our family started, Kurenai was reminded of something that she hadn't yet told her loving husband. Deciding to screw with his head a little bit, the raven hair beauty donned a grin that would put a jackal to shame. I was going to wait till we got to the capital, but oh yes, this is going to be fun time to make you sweat dearest. Oh, Asuma-kun, called Kurenai in an overly sweet tone. Even though I love your enthusiasm about all this, but what if perchance we had gotten a head start on our family started even before Lil Naruto showed up? Said Kurenai grinning like a mad woman. Asuma still wasn't fully grasping the underlying message as indicated by his intelligent response of, huh? After rubbing her stomach with both hands and giving the poor oblivious Appa wink and a nod, realization finally dawned on the future guardian of the fire daimyo. And in true male fashion, his response was equally as enlightened. He gurgled, rolled his eyes and subsequently fainted. His wife's response was a chuckle followed by far too easy love. About 13 years later, are we there yet? No. Is the village really that big? Yes. Is Super Aji-san really in charge? Yes. Are we finally going to be ninja? Yes. Wait for it. Are we there yet? Ugh. The defeated groans of one Sarutobi Asuma resounded clearly over the horizon of the road that leads to the west gate of Konoha. The reason for said groans. The energetic blonde teen amongst his small entourage had, for the last few hours, given his adopted father cause for a mental breakdown with the rapid-fire questions about the status of their trip. Now Naruto-kun, I think you should give your father a break, has got enough gray hair as it is. Besides you'll know when we're close to the village, trust me. Smiled Kurenai to her young adopted son with a giggle at the end, watching her husband flinch to the gray hair part. Yeah you're right mom, sides I think the old man's stress vein on the side of his head grew again. Watching it's almost hypnotic like the second hand on a clock, replied a young Sarutobi Uzumaki Naruto, speaking in a mesmerized tone near the end, while staring at the side of his father's head. Said man's left eye twitched, what is this? Gang up on Asuma Day and I missed the memo. Snickers from his wife and son answered the questions quite clearly. Sighing in defeat, Asuma looked to his left and asked, Shiro think you can give your dear old dad some support? I'm dying here. Said youth chuckled and smirk grinned to his haggard father, I don't know their pop. I've seen you take on 5 Iwanukanen at once and not break a sweat. If mom and Spaz are picking you apart, I know I'm screwed. Hey. I am not a Spaz asshole. Shouted an indignant Naruto. Case in point. Lazily replied Sarutobi Jushiro, flicking his trademark toothpick out of his mouth and replacing it with a new one from his satchel. And warning, long character description ahead. These are the only characters that will require this level of description, as the rest will be wearing their canonical outfits as they do in Part I of Naruto. Sorry about the interruption folks, on with the show. In the 13 years spent in the court of the daimyo of Fire Country, Asuma and Kurenai have for the most part changed very little. Asuma, in reluctant anticipation to resuming his ninja duties in Konoha, has donned his old Jonin uniform, with the proud addition of his Fire Guardian sash tucked under his flak jacket. And even though threats of bodily harm have also been made on numerous occasions for him to quit by his loving spouse, his trademark cigarette remains hanging from his lips. Said lovely wife Kurenai, also in anticipation of resuming her duty, donned her old modified Chunin gear, rejecting the standard navy blue ensemble for a set of fatigues in a deep red color that match her eyes. Despite the very utilitarian purpose of said uniform, the outfit remains very kind to her generous curves. Of course the biggest changes reside with the brothers Sarutobi. Young Naruto, in reflection to his father's tastes in clothing, is dressed in bloused navy blue pants, tapped at the ankles with standard navy blue ninja sandals, the same style as most Chunin. Above that is an average white t-shirt under a rust orange track coat, left open with the collar popped. Flanked at his right hip is the standard kunai holster, while flush mounted to his belt are his preferred weapons of choice. Trench knives, just like his father's. Completing the outfit and strapped to the rear of his waist, the standard khaki-colored multi-purpose ninja supply satchel. Convinced his hair is beyond the control of a brush, his medium-length blonde hair simply shags every which way, with his bangs just barely letting light hit the blue eyes that sit above his whisker-marked cheeks. Standing at about 5'1" tall, the young boy's professional opinion regarding his lack of growth is due to an incident where he threw up on a visiting monk when he was 5, thus cursing him to Kami herself for his sacrilege. On the other end of the spectrum is Jiro, the slightly younger biological son of Kurenai and Asuma. Foregoing his brother's taste in darker shades, Shiro, as Hess affectionately nicknamed, is wearing loose pure white pants that stop open at the shin, where equally white bandages wrap from underneath all the way down to his standard black ninja sandals. Taking color cues from his mother, a pure crimson-red t-shirt tops him off, sitting underneath a pure white high-collared coat with the sleeves rolled up at the elbow. Flanking his right hip is his personal medical supply satchel firmly strapped via a black strapped harness that connects to his left hip, which supports the holster for his only melee weapon. A modified recurved blade with a handle similar to that of a pistol grip. Cross-strapped over his right shoulder and onto his back is a reinforced white duffel bag containing various medical supplies, tools, and storage scrolls. Like most of his father's side, the young boy has the medium dark skin, slightly above average height, his being 5'3" and short spiky hair of the Sarutobi clan. However, it's easy to see his mother's influence via the deep black color of his hair and the trademark blood-red Uchiha eyes. Said red eyes of said young man widened at the sight appearing over the crest of the forested road. Damn, that's a whole lot of wall. Foregoing the continued argument of disproving his spaz-ness as he called it, Naruto followed the path of his brother's eyes to see the imposing front gate of Konohagakure no Sado. He was just as impressed, to say the least. Oh wow. These guys don't mess around. Shouted the young blonde as he pumped his right fist in the air. Well, guess what, Konoha, neither do we. Ready to tear this place a new one, bro. You know it. I'm sure Gramps could use some excitement. Replied Shiro with his trademark smirking grin. With quick simultaneous smacks to the backs of their heads, their father scolded, "You little monsters better not even think about doing what I think you're gonna do." Last year's little prank escapade went way over the line. The daimyo's wife's cat still doesn't have full use of its tail, and most of its fur hasn't grown back yet. Oh yeah. It's amazing what you can do with industrial strength glue and high-grain sandpaper. Evilly chuckled Naruto, wringing his hands in a very maniacal way. The furball's just lucky that's all it lost after that little demon tried to neuter me with those damn claws. I nearly had chakra exhaustion healing the gashes on me and Naruto when we only tried to pet the little hellspawn. Said Shiro's crossing his arms. Asuma, slumping his shoulders in a defeated way, was given his reprieve in the form of his loving wife's verbal support. "Unlike usual, I'm afraid I have to agree with your father," said Kurenai, smirking at her husband, rolling his eyes at the little jab. "Even though I'm sure you could get away with it, try and not give your poor grandfather an ulcer with reports that his grandsons were terrorizing the populace. But the stern talking to like that Nai-chan, it's no wonder we have two undisciplined hellions that never take us seriously." Sarcastically muttered Asuma under his breath, thinking his wife didn't hear it. "Care to repeat that, husband?" Chirped Kurenai in a sickly sweet tone. Ignoring the chuckling of his sons and the chimes of Dad Screwed, the eldest Sarutobi sputtered, "Hehe, well honey," waving his hands frantically in surrender. "Oh look everyone, we're at the gate." Quickly redirecting his family's attention to the massive entrance to Konoha. "Safe at home plate, old man, nice," said Naruto, giving an umpire's complimentary hand gesture. "That was pretty sad, Pop." Smirked Shiro at his father's retreat. "Don't worry boys, me and your father will most definitely finish this little chat later about my parenting skills after we settle in." Grinned Kurenai, patting a grumbling Asuma on the head like a small child. As the four of them walked through the massive entrance, they were brought to a halt. Verbally by two very bored-looking chunin. Asuma, seeing the two coming closer, grinned seeing just who it was that was greeting him and his family. So they finally made these two stooges chunin. Guess this place was really hurting for ninja after all. Looks like they don't recognize us either. Course it's been 13 years. Well, I'm hurt fellas. I woulda thought that even after all these years you'd remember your long-lost big brother. Grinned Asuma, taking a drag of his cigarette and puffing two concentric smoke circles in the air. The one with bandage across his nose had a look of confusion. "Big brother. Me and Azumo really had only one person we called Asuma. You're back, holy shit. Where the hell did you go, man?" Shouted the same Chunin and pointed his finger accusingly toward the grinning older man. "Tetsu, will you freaking chill the hell out? Have some dignity, man." Chided the bandana-wearing Azumo, slapping the newly introduced Katetsu upside his head. "I see you're still the voice of reason, Azumo?" Laughed Asuma. Turning his head slowly to face Asuma, making a strong creaking sound with his neck, Izumo in comedic anger shouted, "And you. You stupid asshole. You just drop off the face of the earth without a word and act like we're cool now. I oughta knock you on your ass, you chain-smoking bastard." Asuma could only sigh. I should have known they would react like this. Not like I had a choice. If anybody knew where we were going and that we were taking Naruto to, trouble would have followed us straight to the capital. Not to mention these two goobers kept secrets like old women do in a salon. No way I could have let them in on it. Walking up next to their father during that thought, the boys decide to get the details on what was going on. "Hey old man, you know these two boners?" questioned Naruto, thumbing in the direction of said boners. If he does, I doubt he'd willingly admit it. "Hey guys, a little louder next time, I'm pretty sure most of the village didn't hear you screeching like banshees a second ago." Sarcastically added Shiro, cleaning out his ear with his pinky mockingly. Meanwhile, as this scene played out, Kurenai could only snicker mirthfully at her son's antics towards her husband's old friends. "Aw man. And they call us emotional messes." Aping with indignant expressions, both Chuninins rounded on the boys. "Hey you little snots, I should kick both your little asses for that," yelled Izumo, his eye twitching away. "Bring it on ladies," retorted Naruto and Shiro simultaneously, giving both men the finger. "Oh, it is so on now kiddies. You just made checks your asses can't cash," shrilled Katetsu, pounding his right fist into his left hand to emphasize that this was serious business. Asuma sidled up next to the both of them, whispering with a smirk on his face, "You two done threatening to beat up my sons, or are you ready to let us go and see my old man?" Both Chunin turned back to Asuma with raised eyebrows and an "Are you fucking serious, you've got kids" look. Then turned back to the two boys they were just arguing with to see if it was true. Both first looked at the dark-haired, red-eyed boy, sporting the same smirking grin Asuma always uses. Seeing the familiar relaxed and confident posture and the toothpick in his mouth, both Katetsu and Izumo nodded to each other in confirmation of the boy's parentage. "Are you fairies done checking me out yet? I don't swing that way." "Yep, definitely Asuma's kid." Then they turned to the shorter blonde-haired blue-eyed loudmouth. Noticing his boisterous stance and blinding fox-like grin, both Chunin began a game of glance tag between Naruto and Asuma, then Kurenai, comparing the physical features of all three. After about 5 sets of glances between all of them, the two bewildered gatekeepers shared a look, blinked absent-mindedly, then nodded. Both then turned back to Asuma once more. "Don't know how to tell you this boss, but," said Izumo flinging his thumb toward the blonde, "but I'm pretty sure that one there is adopted." Humming himself in the face, Asuma muttered sarcastically, "Gee, you think so? Wanna do a blood test just to be sure." "What? I'm adopted?" shrieked Naruto, tears falling from his eyes. Izumo took a step back in horror after dropping that bomb. He didn't know the kid didn't know. He looked at Katetsu, who was shaking his head in disappointment at his friend's heartlessness. "Shut up retard, you've known about being adopted since you were 3. Said Shiro in an amused tone. "Aw come on man. Why you gotta be a killjoy?" The looks on their faces were priceless. Huffed Naruto, his tears magically gone. With a loud clearing of her throat, Kurenai jumped in, "As touching as all this male bonding has been, I think we should get to the tower and report into the Hokage. You know like, now maybe. I've got to agree with mom on this one. The sooner we get that out of the way, the sooner we can get something to eat. Feels like forever since we've stopped for a bite," chimed in Shiro. Noticing the dazed grin on his brother's face, Shiro added, "And this time, something besides that noodle sewage spaz here keeps dumping on us every time we go out." "Baka team. I am not a spaz. And stop knocking ramen or I'll replace your chocolate stash again with the kind that gives people the runs." Chuckling lazily, Shiro countered, "Good thing the daimyo's daughter dove into M before I did. If I remember correctly, after she recovered, she put you into a mild coma with that beating she gave you. Well, you try fighting off that angry cow and see you walk away in one piece, you ratfink." Rounded Naruto, shaking his fist in his brother's face. "Boys." Both Sarutobi brothers whiplashed their heads to face their mother. "Asuma, let's go or I'll end up killing both our sons before we even enter the village," growled Kurenai. Izumo and Katetsu on either side of the condemned man paled and shivered at the look the Genjutsu mistress was giving their old friend. Deciding to be true men in a situation like this, both Chunin patted Asuma on the back, told him good luck, and then booked the hell out before the oncoming shitstorm of female fury. After a muttering of traitorous cowards, Asuma trudged dejectedly back over to his wife. Looking over to Naruto, who was snapping his wrist making bullwhip sounds and laughing, then looking to Shiro shaking his head with a mirthful smirk, Asuma could only sigh in defeat as he began his trek toward the Hokage tower with his family. I get no respect. The walk to the tower was fairly uneventful, to the relief of both Asuma and Kurenai. Both feared that they would run across some foolish villagers with a good memory of Naruto's distinct features and try to attack the poor boy. But 13 years seemed to be the magic number in forgetting such things, and as far as both parents were concerned, that was fine by them. Despite their enthusiasm, Naruto and Shiro were not ignorant of the gravity of coming back to Konoha. As a matter of fact, they were even more weary of trouble than their parents. Both boys were made aware of what Naruto possessed many years prior during a set of unforeseen circumstances that made it important for their parents to admit the truth. It was a major shock, but using their 5-year-old wisdom at the time, they tearfully declared that it would take more than a big stinky fox to break them up. Shiro loved his brother no matter what and would stand up to anybody who would try to hurt him. Likewise, Naruto knew he wasn't the fox, simply the jailer, and that his family would always be there for him. Simple as that. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the current Hokage of Konoha, was enjoying the serenity of his quiet office, despite the mounds of dreaded paperwork scattered about waiting for his notary. Very little in the world could ruin the tranquility of his afternoon till his door slammed open. "Better polish that leaf headband extra hard for me, Super Aji-san, because the best ninja you'll ever see just arrived," yelled a familiar blonde, grinning like a hyena. The sudden jolt of volume in the room caused the Sandame to choke and clutch his chest, then glare at said blonde. "That's what, Gramps, if you didn't know already, Naruto's here," sarcastically muttered Shiro, shaking his head as he entered the room. Seeing the state of his grandfather, he added, "Hey Spaz, you mind not giving the old man a coronary? I hear it's not easy replacing Hokages, you know." Good point. Guess they'll just have to give me the job if his ticker craps out then, huh?" happily chirped Naruto, pointing to himself. Shaking his head at his brother's antics, Shiro moved to the desk to help his beleaguered grandfather back into his chair. After giving him a quick hug and a missed you, Naruto came over and did the same. Asuma and Kurenai entered shortly after, and the Hokage smiled happily. "Welcome back, my boy, I see everyone is doing very well since last I visited you all at the capital." Giving a joke glare to Naruto, "I can also see some things haven't changed either." Smirking as the blonde rubbed the back of his head, laughing nervously under his grandfather's gaze. "Well, if you know a better way to teach this one," smirking and pointing at Naruto, "how not to act like a sugar-rushed mental patient all the time, then knock yourself out there, pop." Sighing, Asuma continued. "As for being back." Looking up and smiling warmly at his father, "Yeah, I think we're all glad to be here." The Sandame simply took in the scene before him with silent tear to his eye. "I'm glad you came back, my son. I wish the circumstances were better for this reunion, but either way, you've given this foolish old man a second chance to be a father and as well as a grandfather." "Thank you, Asuma. Well, I am very glad to see you all here. Now about reinstatement." "Haha, right to the point as usual," smirked Asuma. "Well, we're ready to talk turkey if you are." "Indeed, are you both ready to resume your previous positions then?" "Yes, we're both quite ready. As a matter of fact, sir, I'd like to take the upcoming Jonin exam and then perhaps mentor a Genin team as soon as the opportunity arises," added Kurenai. "Well, we're quite strapped for competent Jonin senseis right now. If you want the position, I wouldn't mind giving you a field promotion and issuing you a team from this year's batch of graduates. The Kaguya-sama field promotions are only given during times of war and even then they're very rare." "How can you be sure I'm up to Jonin standards right now without being tested?" stated a very shocked Jinjutsu mistress. "My dear, first off, you never have to use honorifics with me, we're family," smiled old man Hokage. "Secondly, from what I've heard with my correspondence with the Fire Daimyo, Hess had nothing but praise for the skills. Matter of fact, he told me quite a bit about that incident with the assassination attempt during the recent solstice banquet. If subduing a squad of mist assassins in an evening gown isn't Jonin material, I don't know what is." "Oh. I remember that. Yeah, mom put em in this crazy high-level Jinjutsu she invented on the spot. I think 2 of em still have to wear diapers," laughed Naruto, waving a hand in front of his face as if to get rid of something smelly. "Yeah, she went apeshit when one of the bastards inadvertently copped a feel during the fight. I've never heard grown men scream so loud," snorted Shiro, wriggling around the toothpick in his mouth. "That old saying, female scorned and all that good stuff. Wifey here could take down a samurai army with the right motivation," grinned Asuma, slinging his arm around a blushing Kurenai. Mumbles of perverted assholes and they had it coming could be just barely heard from the embarrassed woman. "Excellent, so it's official then. I'll take care of the paperwork and I can give you a temporary assignment to tide you over until graduation," happily stated the Hokage. "Congratulations. Whoa. Way to go, mom," cheered Naruto, pumping his fist in the air. "Thank you, Hokage. Thank you, dad. I won't disappoint you," replied Kurenai, giving a small bow in appreciation. Chuckling as his daughter's slightly uptight behavior, he turned his attention to his grandsons. "So, what am I to do with you 2 little urchins?" smirked the Sandame. "Boy. Super Aji-san, don't act like you don't know why we're here. Ninja headband. In my hand. Make it happen," commanded Naruto, holding out his hand expectantly. "You know, if I didn't know you better, bro, I'd almost believe you were dumb enough to think that would work." Lazily chuckled Shiro, grabbing his brother's hand and swiping it back down. Hey, don't blow up my spot. I'm trying to haggle here. I've heard about the academy from the old man," said Naruto, thumbing in the direction his father. "And it sounds like a bunch of hand-holding and ass-grabbing if you ask me." Crossing his arms and closing his eyes as he finished. "Nice language. Looks like I'm going to have a talk with you later, Dad, about what you've been telling our boys," chided Kurenai, hardening her gaze at Asuma. Closing his eyes as well and shifting the toothpick in his mouth, Shiro added, "I'll admit Spaz is right, it does sound like a waste of time considering what we can do. But let's not put Gramps on the spot here and just get it over with. I mean, we won't have to waste away there too long, will we?" Looking back towards his grandfather with a tinge of hope. "The graduation exams will be in about 4 months. Typically you need to remain for an entire 6-month semester, but I'm pulling some strings since I know you both have above average skill and could pass easily already." Adding air quotes on the above average part, earning playful smirks from his grandsons. "Besides, this will give you boys a chance to get to know your classmates and future colleagues before heading out into the field. Make some friends, have some fun. Once you become genin, those days come few and far between," added the Hokage. "Hey, as long as I don't have to deal with a bunch of snobby clan heirs, I'll be a happy camper, Super Aji-san. There was plenty of those back at the palace. But sure, I wouldn't mind finding somebody else to hang out with besides the Band-Aid desperado over here." Nodding his head in the direction of his brother, who snorted in response. "I'll remember that when you need me to heal your stupid ass, which knowing you won't be too long from now. But yeah, I wouldn't mind having a couple of run-in buddies myself." Grinned Shiro. Realizing something else he forgot to ask, he added, "Oh yeah. Hey Gramps, I can still go for my Mednin certification before the test, right?" "Of course. I've heard nothing but praise about the progress in your medic training from your sensei. I believe the highest level you can earn at your age though is class 3. That's about Chunin level, I think, so don't quote me on that, my boy," chuckled the Sandame. "Plus when you become certified, I believe you will be the only student from your academy grade that will be a full-fledged medic. That's quite the feat." "Hey, I mean, who'd want to be a male nurse besides him?" Snorted Naruto, only to get a smack upside his head from Shiro. "Excuse me if I'm not an ninjutsu junkie hell-bent on blowing up everything in sight," retorted the red-eyed boy. "Okay, you two, we don't need a war zone in the Hokage office of all places," admonished Kurenai to her boys before the argument escalate further. "Yeah, how about you boys get lost for a bit and go exploring? Me and your mom have some things we still need to talk about with your granddad. You know, boring stuff," chuckled Asuma, hearing Naruto's outburst of new. "Not boring stuff," as he bolted out the door. Sighing at his brother's reaction, Shiro turned to his folks. "I'll try and keep Spaz out of trouble, but don't expect any miracles. See you later, Gramps." And he too, at a more relaxed pace, exited the Hokage office to follow Naruto. At the click of the door, the room became deathly serious. Going into Hokage mode, the Sandame sent a pulsive chakra to detect any hidden presences in the room. Once satisfied that they were alone, the eldest Sarutobi went through a series of hand seals, then touched a special array on his desk to soundproof the office. Taking that as his cue, Asuma crossed his arms and began with an uncharacteristically serious tone. "Okay, Pop, spill it. The message you sent us was cryptic at best, evasive at worst. Tell us what this major threat to the village is that you needed us back so badly." Seeing the expectant look on his son's face and an even more serious look from his son's wife, the Hokage turned and took out his pipe. As he began lighting it, he began, "I'm going to get right to the point then." Taking a quick puff, he turned back, gave both a grave look. "The Uchiha are planning a coup to overthrow the Leaf. The street just outside the Hokage Tower entrance. Wow, this place is way cooler than I thought it would be," said Naruto in awe, taking in the sights around him. "I know, right? Course Dad always sucked at storytelling, so I'm not too surprised," chuckled Shiro. "Massive understatement. I mean, look, there's a big mountain with faces carved on it. He never once mentioned something like that," shouted Naruto, pointing toward the Hokage monument. "Dial it down a notch, Spaz," smirked Shiro. Ignoring his brother's shout of not being a spaz, he continued, "Anyway, take a closer look. I think the second to last one is Gramps. Must be dedicated to the Hokages or something. Ahaha. You're right, that is Super Aji-san. Looks like I've got another reason to nab his job. Giant mountain face statue, here I come. Might as well start planning where I want it," laughed Naruto, framing his hands like an artist toward the area next to the fourth's head. They seemed to be very lifelike and natural. I wonder if there's enough room to fit you with your finger digging into your nose. Can't get more natural than that," laughed Shiro, dodging a swipe from his brother. "That happened one time," raged Naruto. "That was a long-ass trip to Suna and the desert air was too friggin' dry, jerk off." Okay, just kiddin', my little nose miner," chuckled Shiro, making placating hand gestures. "Come on, let's find a place to eat before my stomach explodes." If you can keep it under 30 decibels for the rest of the day, I'll let you pick. Woo-oh. Food time. Follow me, I'll lead the way bro. Loudly cheered Naruto. Jiro could only palm his face. The young Sarutobi brothers wandered the streets of Konoha, taking in more and more of the culture of the unique ninja village. Deciding to head towards the more commercial districts in search of a restaurant, the boys noticed that much of this section of town was filled with an even mix of both ninjas and civilians. Being raised under the assumption that all hidden villages were strict military organizations, it was shocking to say the least to see such a staggering mix of citizenry interacting so naturally. If it weren't for the headbands and vests, you wouldn't think that the smiling individuals were ninja at all. After all, when you've visited villages such as Kiri and Iwa like they had, you tend to get a very standardized view of a harsh and disciplined ninja life. So seeing this pleasant interaction was a massive relief to the outgoing spirit of both boys. Man, I'm glad we don't have to go 24/7 pucker mode like those paranoid jerks in Mist. I swear, every ninja there looked constipated. Sighed Jiro as he continued walking. Haha, is that your medical opinion, doc? Laughed Naruto. No doubt. I'm pretty happy we don't have to suck it up on our downtime. That would have cramped my style. What style? Smirked Jiro, shifting his toothpick around. Back off, Whitey. Might as well hold up a sign that says look at me, kill me now. Grinned Naruto, making mocking gestures as he spoke. PFT, do I need to pull or the family picture from when we were 8? I swear you an orange. Jiro never got the chance to finish that statement as both boys blurred out of the way from the oncoming green locomotive that nearly barreled over them. The boys appeared a split second later, unharmed and adhering to building walls on opposite sides of the street in crouched positions using their chakra. Sharing a look, then focusing on the giant cloud of dust where they were just a second ago, both had the same thought. So much for the pucker mode theory. The Sarutobi brothers were brought out of their musing when the cloud began to shout. Yosh. I apologize for my overzealous youthfulness. In my haste to complete my morning jog, I was not paying close attention to my surroundings. As the cloud of dust finally cleared, the figure within came into focus. To say both brothers, still clinging to the walls, were speechless would be a grave understatement. That's okay man. No harm no foul I guess. Replied Naruto, in a very shell-shocked expression. Holy hell. Those caterpillars look like they're trying to eat his face. There yay. What he said. Added Jiro, in an equally numb tone. Okay, that's just not right. Is that green monstrosity meant to be that tight? Gah. Look away. I appreciate your understanding. For if I could not convince you to accept my apology, I would perform 20 wind sprints around the village on my hands as punishment. Grinned the strange young man, offering a corny thumbs up to seal his promise. Right, muttered both boys in tandem as they front flipped back to the street next to the green-clad lad. I can tell by your agility and reflexes you both must have had significant ninja training like myself. However, I do not recall ever seeing you before at the academy. Quite strange since I pride myself on knowing all about my fellow leaf ninja. Stated the boy, taking up a thinking pose. Don't sweat it, we never went to the academy. At least not yet anyway. As for our training, we had personal instructors back at the capital. Shrugged Jiro, like it wasn't a big deal. That is most impressive to receive private tutoring, at the capital no less. Is it safe to assume your presence in Konoha is to become a leaf genin like myself? Yay. Pretty much. Replied an unnerved Jiro. Genin yes. Like you fuck no. Yosh. Can I get the names of my future colleagues? Shouted the green-clad boy, pumping his fist in the air. I'm Sarutobi Jiro, and this is Jiro never finished as he noticed his unusually quiet brother was too preoccupied gawking at the strange genin, plucking at his own brow hypnotically. A quick slap upside his head and the blonde responded, ow. Oh yeah, I'm Sarutobi Naruto. And I'm going to be the next Hokage. The worthy goal my friend. I too have equally strong goals, for I am Konoha's beautiful green beast, Rock Lee. Both Sarutobi's face planted by the sudden shock of the loud shout that came from directly behind them. A muttering of why the hell is everyone so fucking loud ironically came from Naruto, just as the boys picked themselves back up. In an instant, they rounded to glare at the newcomer that is until they saw who it was. What the shit taco? Tears more of them was the shared thought between the, now very horrified, brothers. Dai-sensei. Lee my adorable student, for what reason have you stopped your youthful morning jog? Surely there is a valid reason to stop so suddenly. For you know the springtime of youth waits for no one. Shouted the newly introduced guy, standing tall in all his glory, grinning like a fool. Dai-sensei, my inspirational life coach and leader, I was too focused in my youthful endeavor that I nearly collided into these future Konoha ninja. If it wasn't for their show of splendid skill, surely they would have suffered injury. Yosh. It was most fortunate then that our village possesses such powerful comrades. Very few can keep in step with Konoha's green beasts, such as our burden of our blinding youth. Declared Guy, pumping his fist in the air. May I get the names of the two who were able to survive my student's exuberance? Oh, Shiro. Replied Shiro after a momentary lapse in cognitive function. A fine name indeed. And how about you, my boy? Said Guy looking at Naruto. Give him a fake name. Give him a fake name. Give him a fake name. It's Naruto. Replied the blonde reluctantly. Damn it. You effing pussy. Excellent. I can tell by looking at you two that our upcoming graduates will be a very powerful crop to bolster our growing ranks. Grinned Guy, blinding the boys with his pearly whites. But fear not, young ones. For if you ever find the need for Taijutsu instruction, look no further. Or if I cannot help you in that field of combat, as punishment I shall climb the highest mountain in Fire Country using my chin. And if Guy-sensei should fall and break both legs, I shall carry him on my back and rush him to the nearest hospital using only my knees. Yelled Lee, giving the brothers a grin just as blinding as Guy's. Ah. It's so bright. Don't go towards the light. Was Naruto's perplexing response as he covered his eyes. And if my wonderful student cannot get me there in time, I shall refuse treatment and simply learn to perform my ninja duties using only my arms. Yosh. If Guy-sensei is forced to become a ninja using only his arms, then I shall follow his lead and do the same. By this time, the citizenry and street vendors nearby mysteriously disappeared as if they knew something ominous was about to occur. Naruto and Shiro, distracted by the raving green beasts, failed to notice until now how alone they were in the once busy section of the commercial district. After surveying the eeriness of their solitude, both looked at each other and shared empathic thought. Oh, this can't be good. And sure enough, it wasn't good. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Sweet merciful crap. It's a man hug. Internally shouted Naruto, completely aghast at what he was seeing. And what was he seeing? Two young men, one teenage and the other twice as old, sporting the same bowl cut and massive eyebrows, embracing one another in the tightest green spandex that could be bought legally, crying rivers of tears as they continued to yell each other's names. This is perhaps the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my young adult life. I mean, isn't this illegal, thought Shiro, toothpick falling out of his gaping mouth. Both boys began wondering if it could get any worse. Then came the sunset backdrop. Both boys, completely blank-faced, slowly turned around and without a word, began trudging away from the scene. Not a word was said, and their posture and speed were almost zombie-like, with their glazed eyes focused straight ahead. Once they felt they were safely away from the incredibly inappropriate show of manly affection, it was Shiro first to break the silence. If mom or dad ever ask. This never happened and we saw nothing. Are we clear? Naruto turned to his brother, but bro, how can you say? Interrupted Shiro, raising his index finger for silence. We weren't there, we saw nothing. His tone indicating that there would be no further argument. Turning to face forward again, Naruto could only nod slowly. Man, I'm gonna need to sleep with my nightlight on tonight. The boys continued their trek around the village at a fair stride. Along the way, they observed more and more people staring at them with an intense curiosity. However, the smiles worn by said people disarmed the worry that the boys felt about being unwelcome. Some more outgoing souls, mostly the young girl variety, worked up enough nerve to introduce themselves personally to the two brothers. Shiro, being a massive flirt, and Naruto's sense of humor and boyish charm, definitely made a serious impact at least until a certain point in the conversation. Suffice to say, any mention of being related to the Hokage, let alone being his grandsons, made further discussions pretty much bottom out soon after, at least to the boys anyway. So, both Naruto and Shiro decided to avoid more of those awkward situations, if you call being mauled by fangirls awkward, by keeping a much lower profile for the rest of the day. Not to mention, being given the Sama honorific by perfect strangers tends to get pretty annoying. Hey Spaz, let's stop here. Said Shiro, lazily nodding his head in the direction of a fairly large outdoor restaurant. Bro. Stop calling me Spaz Dickwood. Stomped Naruto, on the verge of a tantrum. I will when you stop acting like one. Now come on, lunch is on me. Sweet. Chirped a now smiling Naruto. I swear Hess bipolar sometimes. Thought Shiro, shaking his head with a chuckle. The boys walked over and took a seat at one of the outdoor tables, getting comfortable while they waited for someone to take their order. Naruto was getting fairly antsy, searching frantically in the menu for what kind of ramen he wanted to sample first, while Shiro simply tipped back in his chair and closed his eyes meditatively. The boys were brought out of their musings by the very chipper greeting of a young waitress. Hello gentlemen and welcome to Hufu no Konoha, the Leaf's bounty. Smiled the exuberant young girl. My name is Anada and I'll be your server this afternoon. Can I get you anything to start with or are you ready to order? I'm all set. I'll take a short order of honey glazed chicken dumplings with a side of fried rice. And to drink can I get a large glass of milk? Politely asked the red-eyed Sarutobi. Milk? Not a problem. Replied the girl Anada with a warm smile. And how about you cutie? Grinning with a slight blush, Naruto eagerly responded, "I'll start with 4 large bowls of miso and 1 bowl of beef ramen with double the noodles and extra toppings please." The waitress blinked, then tilted her head in a dumbfounded manner before reforming her faltered smile. Well, quite the ramen connoisseur aren't we? There's nothing greater in this world than the blended goodness that is ramen. There is simply nothing negative to be found from mass ramen indulgence. Responded Naruto in an uncharacteristic sage-like tone. "Tapeworm comes to mind," snorted Shiro. "Shut it, blasphemer." With a feminine chuckle, Anata made herself known again. "Well, I'll leave you two to your intense ramen discussion. In the meantime I'll go ahead and hand off your orders and I should be back in about 10 minutes." With a wink and a smile, the young girl rushed off, leaving the boys to resume their debate. After a few minutes of the boys playing insult tag, like all brothers do, Shiro noticed his blonde Nikki, older brother, suddenly stop mid-sentence with a gaping look on his face. "What do I have as it?" asked Shiro, rubbing his cheek with his hand. "Wow," said Naruto in awe. "Bro, 6 o'clock. Using the finest in ninja-like stealth, Shiro subtly glanced into the reflection of a nearby building window to view whatever it was his brother seemed so enthralled by. Safe to say, the red-eyed boy saw that his brother had good taste. About 2 tables behind Shiro sat a young, well-endowed woman, perhaps in her early 30s, with dusky purple hair eating dango dumplings. Among other things, her most impressive attribute was her clothing. Hugging her every curve was tight mesh ninja armor, covering her upper body and coming down to mid-thigh underneath an incredibly short khaki skirt. The final ingredient. The baggy tan trench coat, undoubtedly worn by the woman more for utility, yet still managing to pull it off. No mistake about it. This deadly beauty was a Konoha kunoichi and perhaps one of the hottest women either of these boys had ever seen. Of course, both boys having the same taste in women doesn't necessarily mean they have the same skills in interacting with the opposite sex. In fact, subtlety was one of many skills held solely by the red-eyed brother. "Nice eye spaz," smirked Shiro, still reclining in his chair. "But seriously, stop staring and pick up your jaw before she comes over here and pummels you," warned the boy in an amused tone. "Huh?" Apparently the blonde wasn't paying attention. "I said, stop gawking in her direction like the hopeless fool you are before she comes over here and caves your head in," repeated Shiro in a more serious tone. "What's the big deal? It's not like I'm Naruto." Never finished as a kunai embedded itself into the backrest of his chair, right next to his neck. "Well, it was nice knowing ya," chuckled an unfazed Shiro, enjoying the look on his brother's face. "Good thing he shifted that quarter of an inch at the last second or I'd be stuck with cleanup duty. Geez, he has the awareness to avoid fatal attacks on instinct, but can't leer at a woman with an ounce of discretion. You're still one of a kind there, spaz." Shiro was brought out of his thoughts when the hot chick appeared behind his naive blonde sibling and draped herself on his shoulders with a hungry grin. "So tell me, whatever could it be about little old me that you found so interesting to stare at me so intently?" Asked a strange kunoichi in a sickly sweet voice, waving another kunai in front of Naruto's face. Moving close to Naruto's ear, she whispered in a sultry voice, "Were we having naughty thoughts about me, my little man?" Her warm breath causing a shiver to run down the poor lad's body. I was and you were," was all the poor boy could get out with his head so frazzled. All the young woman could do was grin even more with that response. "Teaches this little shit to ogle me like that. Course I was looking for a bit of fun, what better entertainment than to give this pervy shrimp a wet dream in public." Meanwhile, Shiro remained lazily relaxed in his reclined position, grin smirking at this very R-rated interaction between his teenage brother and this carnivorous pseudo-nymphomaniac. Naruto, in desperation, sent a pleading look to his sibling to get him out of this embarrassing situation. This didn't go unnoticed by the experienced purple-haired ninja. "Enjoying the show?" asked the woman as she nibbled on a whimpering Naruto's ear. "Am I enjoying the sight of you practically raping my brother in public? Can't say it was on my list of things I want to see before I die," chuckled the dark-haired boy, adding air quotes to emphasize his sarcasm. "Oh? A smart ass and a clueless perv. My, quite the little family," smirked the woman in return. "Those eyes look damn familiar though." "Boy. I'm not a perv. Sides, not like with that outfit you aren't looking for attention anyway." "Irk," cried an indignant blonde before he was silenced by kunai being held tightly to his throat. "Shhhhhh, the grown-ups are talking right now, my whiskered boy toy. We'll play later," whispered the woman once again. She sealed the promise of future fun by slowly licking the boy's cheek. By now Naruto's brain completely shut down, leaving him a wide-eyed, motionless statue at the table. "Great. You put him in a hormone coma," deadpanned Shiro, shaking his head. "Thanks so much. You know I've gotta live with him, right? TFT whatever. Teaches the little turd to eyeball me," said the deadly beauty, picking herself up off Naruto and resheathing her kunai. "I will say, I'm surprised he hasn't died of blood loss after I had my fun," she finished with a grin. Well Spaz there isn't a pervert, he just has really shitty people skills. He's of the stare at something bright and shiny variety of people. Chuckled Shiro. In all honesty though, he didn't mean to offend. He just got his hand caught in the cookie jar innocently admiring a beautiful woman. Oh? And what about you then? Don't think I didn't catch you sneaking a peek even if you didn't make it as obvious. Said the woman in an amused voice, crossing her arms. Nah, mom hates pervs, and so do I won't lie, you are quite gorgeous and equally deadly. Things I respect the most in a woman. But you've got one thing that doesn't interest me. Replied Shiro, crossing his arms as well. Oh really? Tell me, what could make you not want all of this? Grinned the Kunoichi, taking a very sultry pose. Simple. You're fucking nuts. Laughed Shiro, oddly without the fear that this woman could tear him apart. Even more odd, the woman laughed right back. Hahaha. Good eye kid. Aw shit, it's nice to know people out there think so highly about me. Winding down her laugh and wiping a tear from her eye. Why does this conversation sound so damn familiar? Flashback. 14 years ago. Nai-chan. Wait up. I need your advice on something. Shouted a certain purple-haired Kunoichi, sprinting towards her best friend. Oh hey, what's up Anko-chan? Smiled her red-eyed friend. I'm pissed that's what's up. I asked out that bastard Kakashi and he turned me down. Shouted the irate woman, flailing her arms around in anger. I mean he reads that perverted trash all the time in public. I woulda thought he'd kill to get a piece of this. Why do you think he turned down a fine night of Anko-ness? That's quite simple Anko-chan. You're fucking nuts. Laughed the red-eyed teenager. Haha, good point. Here I thought there was something wrong with me. Thanks Nai-chan, you're the best. Flashback. Kai. Hey kid. Sup. This is kind of out of nowhere, but you wouldn't happen to be related to a woman named Kurenai would ya? Related? Replied Shiro raising an eyebrow. Ha, try mom. Sounds like you know her. Well no shit Nai-chan making babies go figure, mused Anko quietly to herself. Looking back to the newly discovered son of her old friend she smirked. Hey, when you see your straight arrow mom, tell her that her old friend Anko wants to catch up on 13 years of binge drinking. By the honor of my name, Saratobi Ju Shiro, it shall be done milady. Announced Shiro, in an comically epic voice, followed by a mirthful chuckle. Telling from your smartest sense of humor and that annoying smirk of yours, I'm guessing Nai-chan is still shacked up with that smokestack bum Asuma. Chuckled Anko, shaking her head. Your old man lucked out. She was always way too good for him. Shiro simply shrugged at that. Alright you little asshole, I'll leave you and your urchin-headed half-perv brother in one piece for now. Said the older woman. Looking back at Naruto and seeing he was still locked into his mind she grinned mischievously. Oh yay, when he wakes up, make sure to give him shit that one of his mom's childhood friends gave him a woody. A chance to scar him for life eh? You're speaking my language lady. Answered Shiro with an equally mischievous smirk. With a wink and a wave, Anko Shunshined, body flickered, away just before the boy's waitress walked over with their orders. I'm sorry for the wait, your order took a bit longer than I expected. Apologized the young girl as she placed the food on the table from her serving tray. No trouble at all. We passed the time having an interesting conversation with one of your more interesting patrons. Chuckled Shiro, giving a thanks as he was handed his dumplings. Oh Mitarashi-san. She comes here quite often, quite the dango addict too. She tends to clear out most of our inventory on a regular basis. Laughed Anada. As she was about to serve Naruto, she finally noticed her blonde customer's state of awareness or in his case, lack thereof. Is he alright? Here hand me one of the misos from the tray there. Signaled Shiro. After being given the ramen, the dark-haired boy leaned over the table, swaying the bowl teasingly under Naruto's nose. The effect was almost instant. Shocking himself back to life and in his usual energetic self, Naruto quickly grasped his treasured culinary indulgence and following a boisterous pre-meal prayer, began to savagely devour his prize with gusto. Shiro observed the scene with his usual mirthful smirk as he mixed a personal pouch chocolate powder into his milk. The waitress Anada however, was downright appalled seeing a large-sized bowl of ramen eaten so quickly. Taking notice of the girl's disgusted look, Shiro took a swig of his chocolate milk and clarified. Don't feel too bad. It's like watching horror movies. When you see enough of them, you become desensitized and they no longer have any effect. Okay said the girl a bit skeptically. Turning back to Shiro she continued. Well, when you two are ready, just signal me for the bill and I'll cash you out. With a final smile, the young girl headed off and left the two brothers to enjoy their meals. As Shiro knocked back one of his dumplings, he raised an eyebrow at the fact that Naruto's ramen eating pace had slowed down considerably from what would be considered normal at least for him. Oh, something's wrong. Alright Spaz, out with it. Snarling at the Spaz comment, Naruto recovered and in a reluctant tone asked, no did that woman, did she what? After I passed out, did she, have her way with me? That last part, whispered by Naruto with his hand cupping his mouth. Did you want her to have her way with you? Chuckled Shiro. What? No. Yelled the blonde indignantly. I mean she was really pretty and all, but I mean did she say anything about me? Asked Naruto, with a tinge of hope in his voice. Okay, wow, you are fucking hopeless, you know that. Chided Shiro, setting down his beverage. The chick licks your face and you think you're both going steady now. Hey, newsflash Casanova, that woman, keyword is woman here, jailbait, was an old friend of mom's. Which means, she's mom's age. And with that thought, have fun sleeping tonight. Laughed a red-eyed boy, concluding his tirade. Mom's age-old friend, what the hell? Dude, she was grinding her boobs on my back while rubbing the inside of my leg. What's wrong with these people? Shouted a horrified Naruto in a whispered voice, feeling like he lost some of his precious childhood innocence. Lazily popping another dumpling and looking to the sky, Shiro added, yay, this place sure does host some interesting ones, alright. Between the green spandex wearing members of Nambla and the psychotic hot ninja women with a penchant for young male flesh, Konoha has quite the assortment to choose from nah. Concluded the boy, turning to meet his brother's gaze at the end. Chuckling at Naruto's full body shiver, Shiro turned to look at the sky once again to continue his thoughts about their new life in this strange ninja village. A smart-mouthed med nin and an overexcited ninjutsu addictee will fit in just fine. Meanwhile, back at the Hokage tower, should I left right after one disaster and come back in time for another? Was all Saratobi Asuma could say after hearing the lengthy dissertation of the Uchiha clan's plans to topple Konoha. I can't believe the lengths that one of village's oldest and most powerful clans is willing to go to take control. It's disturbing. Quietly added Kurenai, looking down at the floor in mute shock. Yes. And this is merely the information I've been able to obtain from my hidden informant within the clan. Added the Sandaime, in a grave tone. There's no telling what else they have cooked up besides what we know. Sighing, Asuma looked back to his father and stated in mild anger, the boys need to know, especially Naruto. You can't rely on the fact that his identity was kept hidden all these years, especially with the leaks. They probably already know who he is and what he has. Letting his anger peak, he growled, and tell me why the hell you wanted him brought back here if the village is so damn compromised. Asuma-kun, calm down, I'm sure your father had a good reason for this. Clasping her husband's hand soothingly while looking back to the Hokage expectantly for an answer. Yes, there is a good reason. In fact, it was the only choice we had to assure his safety in all this, I'm afraid. Sighed the elder Saratobi. Looking back up with a firm, serious expression only a Hokage could manage, he continued. Unfortunately, the Uchiha's influence is far more extensive outside of the village than inside, more specifically, at the capital with the fire daimyo himself. Dating back to before the founding of the village, the daimyo's ancestors relied heavily on the use of the Uchiha clan's ninja for their wet work. Because of this, the loyalty between their families runs far deeper than the loyalties between the daimyo and Konoha's current administration. Pausing to let that somewhat brief overview to sink in, he grimly summarized, in short, the Uchiha have unwritten support to do whatever they want with whomever they want with very little resistance from the daimyo and his people. So because the Uchiha have the royal court in their pocket, our safety in Naruto's was at greater risk at the capital than it is here. Fucking hell, those arrogant cocksuckers could have people walk right into the palace and walk out with Naruto without any of the guards lifting a finger. Stated Asuma with barely contained rage. I gave 13 years of my life protecting them and they would dare allow my son to be taken over my dead body. That is correct. The Uchiha have numerous agents in the capital and I have little doubt they have been made privy to Naruto's identity already. Since the daimyo wouldn't try to stop the Uchiha from abducting him, you can see why I felt it better to keep him here amongst those we can trust. Supplemented the Sandaime evenly, despite his personal anguish with everything being discussed. Kurenai, seeing her husband's raging yet vacant look, decided to speak up. Hokage-sama, has a plan been drawn up yet in which to combat this threat? The Hokage brightened his mood a tiny bit and answered, fortunately, the Uchiha still lack the proper resources in which to put their plans in motion, at least for now. From what my informant has said, we have no need to be on immediate alert for some time. Showing some signs of life again, Asuma spoke up, knowing you though, Pop, you won't wait till the final countdown before putting something together. Whatever it is, we want in. His statement ending with a fierce determination. Kurenai nodded, wordlessly voicing her agreement to be involved as well. I had no doubt that you both would wish to be involved in devising a defense strategy knowing the stakes. Stated the Sandaime tonelessly. Then he looked his son straight in the eye and in a predatorily playful tone asked. So, tell me my boy. Do you still fancy yourself a master of shogi? Asuma's response was a savage grin. 4 days later. Monday morning. Knock knock knock. Barely audible talking. Knock knock knock. Ugh, go away, need sleepy, mumbled the slumbering beast under its large bed covers, trying to ignore the annoying sound of the knocking door. Knock knock knock. Housekeeping, you want mint for pillow? Was heard in a forced accented feminine voice. Please, I don't want any wine, the half asleep animal. Knock knock knock. Housekeeping, you want me fluff pillow? No pillow sleeping, uttered the poor exhausted individual, turning over desperately seeking a few more precious moments of slumber. Knock knock knock. Housekeeping, you want me jerk you off? Again, said the voice, tone increasing with amusement. "I fucking asshole," mumbled the young blonde under his breath. "Fine, I get it, I'm getting up, hang on." Half yelled the boy as he trudged to his bedroom door wrapped in his sheets. As he opened the door, he received a much more formal greeting by his wake-up call. "Good morning, sunshine." Grinned a familiar dark-haired boy, giving a slight wave in a goofy manner. "Yikes, put on some pants, dude," said the boy, covering his eyes as if blinded. "You couldn't give me 10 more minutes, just 10 more effing minutes. I mean, my god, it's not like we're running late or anything." "Look," muttered a half-awake Naruto, clinging to his toga of sheets as he pointed to his desk clock. "There, you do realize it's blinking 12 o'clock right now, right?" chuckled Jiro mirthfully. "Huh?" was Naruto's intelligent response, and he squinted to see what his clock said. "Oh shit. What time is it?" "You're safe, don't worry," said Jiro, waving off his brother's concern. "Mom had a feeling you reset it again in your sleep, so she sent me up as insurance so that you wouldn't miss breakfast." Lazily replied Jiro as he plopped himself on his brother's bed. "She said, and I quote, 'Today my boys are on their way to becoming men and need a meal worthy of the occasion,' end quote. In short, she has a nice spread being prepared as we speak and wants our asses downstairs pronto. Gee, another reason to try and baby us like she always does. When was the last time we needed her to cook for us? We're almost 14, for God's sake," grumbled Naruto, wiping the sand from his eyes. "She's just worried, bro. She knows in a few months, we're going to be full-blown ninja. Ninja who will kill or be killed. Death dealers for the highest bidder," stated Jiro in an unusually serious tone. Looking Naruto in the eye, he continued, "It's a life she thinks we're not prepared to deal with yet, one she doesn't want us to deal with yet." "Is that mom talking or is it you?" replied Naruto, returning his brother's gaze with one equally as serious. "Don't. You know what I had to do to be a medic. The promises I made. You know I can never take a life," said the red-eyed boy with resolute determination in his voice. "And you won't have to. Not so long as I'm around. I'll protect you from that burden, just like I always have, Tauto," said the blue-eyed boy with even greater absolution in his voice. Afterwards, there was a lengthy silence between the brothers, letting their conflicted thoughts occupy themselves from going into further discussion. The silence was soon ended by Naruto's sudden chuckling. "Wow. When did we become all doom and gloom?" laughed Naruto, scratching the back of his head. "Come on, we have nothing to worry about for a long time. It's not like we're going straight into hunting Nukenin or protecting VIPs right out of the gate. Hell, we're probably going to get stuck with those stupid-ass chores Dad mentioned all Genin need to start with." "Yay, you're probably right," quietly admitted the red-eyed boy, still deep in thought but in a noticeably brighter mood. "Geez, look at us. I sound smart and you sound serious, something must be wrong in the world for this to happen," chuckled Naruto as he wiggling his hands in an eerie way. "The FFT, whatever, just hurry up and get ready. Then once we're properly gorged we'll head to the academy. Wake me up when you're done," muttered Jiro, turning over in Naruto's bed, falling asleep. Naruto himself just stood there, stunned, perplexed and indignant that his brother just stole his bed after just giving him a hassle for sleeping in. So what does a brother do in this kind of situation? He punches his brother in the shoulder really freaking hard. "Dude, get the fuck out of my room." Once Naruto was cleaned and dressed, he made his way down to the kitchen to enjoy breakfast with the rest of his interesting little family. Like it was implied by Jiro earlier, Kurenai made a feast that was a testament to the strength of the support legs of the dinner table. Literally pounds of hash browns, bacon, toast, ramen, Naruto's insistence, eggs, cheese, and even steak was set upon the table with motherly enthusiasm. There wasn't a bare spot of the oak surface to be seen in the sea of delectable goodness. It really was a meal worthy of the occasion. Conversation was, unsurprisingly, minimal at best. The majority of the talking involved Asuma and Kurenai double-checking with the brothers if they had their things packed and ready to go, offering the boys sage-like advice about how to handle the academics, and finally telling them to stay out of trouble, typical parent stuff. All the boys did was act like they were paying attention, nodding absent-mindedly while murdering their food. Of course, with the talking, eating, and dulled morning senses, the boys never noticed how much time had flown by until it was too late. It is now that we find both Sarutobi lads launching themselves from rooftop to rooftop with Jonin-like speed to keep from being late on their first day as Konoha Academy cadets. "Oh god, I wish we had more time to digest, I feel like I'm gonna hurl," muttered Jiro, running a glowing green hand over his stomach as he jumped to the next roof. "Don't you freaking dare. If you puke then I'll puke," yelled Naruto, shaking his fist at his brother as he bounded to the next building. "If that happens, there will be an epic chain reaction that won't stop till there's nothing left." "Geez, overdramatic much. Fine, I get it, I'm being a baby. I'll suck it up, okay? Suck it up." Not the best line for the topic, bro. chuckled the blonde. Finally. I can see the academy, we're almost there. Nice. We have 15 minutes to spare too. Bet we could have made it 30 if we went all out. Smirked the dark-haired brother after glancing at his watch. Hey, it was your idea not to go balls deep showing off our abilities. You said it yourself that you don't want to draw too much attention and get mobbed like we did when we first got here. Chided Naruto as he made an elaborate front flip off the roof, making a crouched landing on the sidewalk outside of the campus gate without making a sound. Following suit, Jiro performed a toned-down version of the same flip, landing to his brother's left with equally subtle results. Well said, you walking contradiction. If you hate being called Naruto-sama more than I hate being called Yushiro-sama, tone down the acrobatics please. We don't need people hovering over us like lost sheep. Mutterings of not a spaz and freaking hypocrite were all that could be heard from the indignant blonde as the young Sarutobi brothers took notice that they were receiving some of that unwanted attention that they were just discussing. Feeling a bit anxious under the stairs, the boys took deep breaths and shared an empathic look. Jiro gave his patented don't be a loud moron look to his brother, while Naruto reflected it with his don't be a condescending asshole look. Nodding in agreement, they confidently began their trek, politely but quietly acknowledging the glances they received. The first parent-child pair they noticed was ironically the least noticeable of the group. The father and son, who both looked almost identical aside from some minor differences, were the epitome of low-key, with their high-collared trench coats and dark sunglasses, covering up most of their stoic facial features. Politely, both boys nodded to the two, who in accordance nodded right back in greeting. The next family, by stark contrast to the first, was easily the loudest and most colorful. The oldest woman, who was dressed in modified Jonin attire, was laughing quite gutturally with a younger girl in a Chunin vest, possibly daughter or niece, and a boy their age dressed in a furry parka. Their most standout feature was their feral appearance and the company of fierce dogs of various sizes that were with them. Luckily their loud and boisterous conversation kept them from observing the Sarutobis with more than just a casual glance. The last family they took notice of came off as the most austere and proper of the bunch. The group of the 5 pale-eyed men, all dressed in identical Chunin gear, gave off an air of arrogance and superiority that made the boys' skin crawl with what Naruto dubbed douche chills. What made the sight confusing though was the girl, who was clearly related to the men with her dark hair and lavender eyes, yet had polar opposite body language. The girl was so timid and scared, she was literally trying to sink into her coat to avoid drawing attention to herself in fear of some kind of harsh judgment. Feeling that the girl was a kindred spirit of sorts, when the boys made eye contact with her, they offered her warm smiles and nods, which was blushingly returned. Finally clear of the sea of curious eyes and arriving at the front entrance, the boys were just about home free when thunk, Sanuva bitch. Why is the front door locked? Raged Naruto internally. Damn, they must not open the doors until the minute classes start. Now what? Thought Jiro, looking around for another way into the school. Casually removing themselves from the focused view of the front door, both Sarutobis began subtle visual scans of the building, looking for any kind of opening. After less than a minute, Naruto's eye caught a lone window at the very top floor of the 10-story building that was still partially open. Making a subtle hand gesture only they would understand, the blonde indicated the point of entry to his dark-haired brother, who then nodded in confirmation. Sharing another empathic glance of acknowledgement, the duo casually moved toward the adjoining wall behind a nearby tree, where they then hopped onto said wall and began a full sprint vertically to the top. They were just about home free, that is, until the very loud clearing of a throat brought the 2 teenage boys to a skidding halt right then and there. Standing there, defying gravity with their chakra, the boys shared one last look that said it all. Busted. So would you boys like to explain why you're trying to break into the school before opening bell? Slowly, Naruto and Jiro turned around to meet the gaze of a very annoyed Chunin, whose most distinguishing feature besides his bundled hair was a scar that ran across his nose. Further inspection showed he was carrying books and lesson plans, leaving his identity pretty much solidified as one of the academy instructors, most likely the very one who opens the front entrance every morning. And of course, thanks to the Chunin's loud voice, the boys took notice of the one thing they wanted to avoid this morning. The undivided attention of the students and parents down near the front gate. There were looks of awe, confusion, surprise, and even some looks of jealousy and anger, especially from a family that had dark hair, dark eyes that was just arriving. Suffice to say, the boys were confused as to why they got these looks for simply walking up a wall. Didn't all senior academy students know how to do basic chakra manipulation? The scar-faced instructor, showing his growing frustration and annoyance, crossed his arms and made himself known again. Well, I'm waiting. The two just stood there on the wall like it was no big thing, mulling over what to say in this highly embarrassing and volatile situation. It was Naruto who volunteered to be the spokesperson of the two. Well, you see, Iruka-sensei. Answered the instructor in an even tone. Right. Well, me and my brother here just wanted to get a head start on our education, you know. So we saw this window open over here and we were like, hey, let's sneak in early and get our academia on. And then we were like hells yeah bitch, let's get in there and learn about some stuff like that down here right now. Yelled Iruka. Yes sir. Both Naruto and Shiro chirped in tandem as they front flipped off the building and landed softly in front of the irate ninja teacher. The blonde just stood there grinning widely and scratching his head sheepishly, while the dark-haired boy stood there lazily, flicking the toothpick in his mouth around the only outward sign that he too was feeling nervous. Blaring daggers at the two troublemakers, the scarred Chunin slowly pointed his finger toward the front entrance and uttered one very serious command, move. The boys, despite the embarrassment, swallowed up their hurt pride and, with feigned confidence, walked back to the group of the still staring students and parents. Turning to his brother, Naruto chuckled and said, the morning turned out pretty well, don't you think? All Shiro could do was face palm. Asayumi no Iruka, renowned Konoha Academy instructor and unparalleled disciplinary genius, was having a horrible morning, would be a grave understatement. It started simple enough. The hot water heater in his apartment complex had, once again, decided to die, leaving the poor 24-year-old Chunin with nothing but cold water to shower with. Add in the fact that his night out drinking with a certain snake mistress had given him a massive hangover, you can see why his mood was far from good. And of course he had to deal with two new delinquent smart-mouth students that were trying to sneak into the academy this morning, using a technique that was supposed to be beyond that of most Chunin, let alone senior academy cadets. Oh but he got his kicks in alright. Nothing helps punish a couple of smartasses like those two, like good old public embarrassment. One could say it was an old technique he used in his youth as a prankster, reborn as a form of discipline he liked to use for especially deserving students, hilarious but effective. Unfortunately, his jollies were cut very short. The two boys he humiliated were the Hokage's grandsons. Oh yes, when he saw his revised class roster with two new students added with the Sarutobi clan name, it wasn't hard to put two and two together. Swallowing his pride, he approached the boys before opening bell to hopefully stem any kind of difficulty there might be for what he did. Konohamaru, the Hokage's other grandson, was already a handful to deal with as it was in the freshman class. Iruka certainly didn't want to catch the ire of two more arrogant and vindictive Sarutobi children. But when the young teacher pulled them aside and began apologizing, the boys simply waved him off saying, we don't want respect because of who we're related to. We earn what we keep. And you were right to bust us for sneaking in. Just treat us like anybody else you teach, that's all we ask. So maybe the morning wasn't that bad after all. Of course, getting rid of the hangover would be nice too. It is with that thought, we now find the scarred instructor leaning on the front of his desk, facing the rows and rows of his precious students, doing the opening roll call, and checking off those present on his trusty clipboard. And Yuzuka Kiba. Right here. Yelled a grinning feral boy, the same one who was noticed by the brothers from this morning. The small white puppy on his head also yipped to announce he was there as well. Yubei Keiko. Present. Evenly responded a plain girl seated in the front row. Narashikamaru. No response. Narashikamaru. This time, all eyes in the class were focused on the form of a dark-haired boy with his hair bound in the back who was completely asleep. Narashikamaru. Yelled Iruka, his patience wearing down even more. Still no response from the comatose boy. Whack. Ow. Cried the boy, holding his head. He whipped his head around to face the perpetrator. Damn you abusive woman. Thank you Ino. You're welcome Iruka-sensei. Grinned the platinum blonde girl who was seated next to the fuming Shikamaru. The rest of roll call was finished not long after. It was at this point that Iruka called for the class's attention. Only after using the effective teacher technique, Kaikanshiseki Urusai no Jutsu, loud giant head technique, did the class actually give the attention that was asked. Class, we have two new students who will be joining us today. Brothers in fact. They just moved here from the capital of Hai no Kuni, so I imagine they're still getting used to everything in Konoha. Announced the Chunin instructor, measuring the looks of each of his students. So please be considerate. Said Iruka, his eyes fixating on a dark-haired boy dressed in blue and white who simply glared in return. Arrogant little prick, better not start today. I've about had it with his attitude. Shaking off that thought, Iruka turned his gaze to the classroom door and called out, alright boys, you can come in now. Slowly the door opened and in walked the dynamic duo themselves, Shiro and Naruto. Deciding to try and keep everything more low-key since the morning was a veritable circus of a fuck-up as Shiro called it, they walked slowly yet confidently to the front of the class and came to a halt in front of the teacher's desk, standing side by side. Naruto grinned widely as he stood up straight with his arms crossed across his chest. Shiro simply stood there in a lax posture with his hands in his pocket, smirking as he chewed on his toothpick. It was at this point Naruto took a second to look around, recognizing some of those he saw earlier outside. Let's see. Well, there's the dog boy, there's Trenchcoat Mafia, he seemed cool, hey, there's the cute shy girl. Let's see who else I recognize, wait, what the hell's that kid's problem? Stop eyeballing me, dickhole. Finished Naruto's thoughts while returning a hard glance to the glaring dark-haired boy in blue. Iruka, sensing the growing tension, decided to stop what could become an oncoming argument. "Alright, how about you two introduce yourselves? You know, tell us your likes, dislikes, plans for the future, things like that," smiled the young sensei. Naruto, always one to enjoy a little well-earned attention, led the charge. "Yo. Name's Sarutobi Naruto. I just moved here about a week ago with my family, so me and my brother here could become official ninja of the leaf. Some of the things I like include training, playing the guitar, hanging out with my family, and last but not least ramen," smiled Naruto, speaking with boisterous enthusiasm. "Some of the things I hate include arrogance, people who live to hurt others, and those who take it easy on me because of who I'm related to." At this point, Naruto's expression and tone became a bit more subdued. "I do however have two goals. I want to protect my family and loved ones from everything and anything that might come to harm them and eventually become the greatest Hokage Konoha has ever had." Punctuating his declaration with a pumped fist and a bright smile. The introduction had quite the effect. Some of the boys, especially the feral boy and a portly boy who was gorging on a bag of chips, grinned and nodded at the entertaining showmanship of this strange new student. He seemed like somebody that would be cool to hang with. And of course, with a gleaming smile and chivalrous goals, faint blushes and smiles could be seen on the prospective Kunoichi of the class directed at the blonde boy. More so from the lavender-eyed girl in the back row and a certain blonde girl who wasn't even fully aware of her reaction. Naruto then turned to grin and nod at his brother, who returned with a grin and nod of his own. It was now Shiro's turn. "Well, it's going to be a bit tough following up to my brother's introduction, but I'll give it the old college try," chuckled Shiro as Naruto rolled his eyes. "My name is Sarutobi Shiro, but everyone sticks with calling me Shiro. As my bro here just said, we just moved here not too long ago, but our folks were originally from here before our dad decided to join the 12 Guardians of Fire. So I guess we're not perfect strangers to the village," the red-eyed boy stated matter-of-factly. "Some of the things I like doing in my free time include studying and creating medicine, training, hanging with my folks and brother, and of course chocolate. Terrorizing Spaz here is fun too," laughed Shiro, dodging a swipe from his indignant brother. "I don't dislike much. Arrogant people piss me off, suck-ups rub me the wrong way, and I absolutely can't stand those who prey on the weak." The red-eyed boy's voice carrying a deeper octave than before, his gaze hardening. "I have no goals, simply a promise. I will treat the wounded and sick no matter who they are, and I'll never take a life." His voice bound with unwavering absolution. "A ninja who won't kill. Pathetic. Sasuke," yelled Iruka. "What did you just say, asshole?" growled Naruto, narrowing his icy blue eyes dangerously at the boy who had been glaring at him and his brother since they first entered the room. The boy, Sasuke, stood from his chair and scoffed while answering in a condescending tone, "I said your brother is a pathetic excuse for a shinobi. Besides being a useless bandage handler, he refuses to kill the very definition of being a ninja. PFFT, if it wasn't for the Hokage, you two dead lasts wouldn't even be here." "That's enough, Sasuke," yelled Iruka, losing his patience with the boy's attitude. "Wait, why would the Hokage have anything to do with them being in our class?" asked the dog boy in a bewildered tone. "HN, you really are a moron, Inyazuka." Hearing this, the Inyazuka growled at Sasuke, who again scoffed. "Their clan name is Sarutobi. They're the Hokage's grandsons and must have been given special treatment to join the academy like this. There's no other reason for a foolish loudmouth and a weak-minded pacifist to be given the chance to become ninja." After hearing those closing remarks, Naruto was nearing his breaking point. "I've about had it with you." Just as he was about to rush the arrogant little snot, he felt a firm hand on his shoulder keeping him still. He looked back to see his brother Shiro give him a look and a shake of his head. The message made clear to let it go for now anyway. If one were to have looked close enough, they would have seen a warping distortion that was forming around the blonde prior to his brother's interference. "Seems despite your brother's weak-mindedness, he knows power when he sees it. He knows you couldn't possibly stand up to an Uchiha," chided Sasuke arrogantly as he smirked at the enraged blonde. It was at that point that a deep laughter rang through the classroom, silencing the murmurs that were passing between the other students about Sasuke fighting the Hokage's grandson. "Ha ha ha ha. Wow, you're way off, my grumpy little friend. For you see, my weak pacifist views, as you so eloquently put it, were the only things that kept me from letting my brother here tear you apart just now, you cocky little faggot. You can thank me later," smirked Shiro, with an uncharacteristic sadistic glint in his blood-red eyes. The comment itself got plenty of chuckles from the males in the audience, as Sasuke could be heard making audible growling sounds for Shiro's disrespect of an Uchiha's skill. "Hey, you can't talk to Sasuke-kun like that," cried a pink-haired girl who was seated next to the Uchiha himself. Supportive cries from the other girls in the room were heard soon after. All except for two. The pale-eyed girl, who was sitting in the back with a nervous look on her face from all the arguing, And the blonde girl, who looked like she was having an internal battle about what to do. Slam. That's enough. Sasuke, if I hear another word out of you, I'll put your ass into detention for next month. Do you understand? Shouted Iruka once more, with much more authority, after slamming both fists on his desk. Gee, fine. I'm done anyway. Muttered the Uchiha under his breath, sitting back into his seat. Calming himself back down, the instructor turned his attention to the brothers. You two. Go ahead and find yourselves a seat so I can begin the first lesson of the morning. Yes, Iruka-sensei. Acknowledged both boys simultaneously. The brothers made their way up the rows, taking a glance to see what was available. Shiro caught sight of the Inyazuka boy waving him onto an open spot next to him in one of the rear desk rows shared with the silent boy in the trench coat. With a smirk and a nod, he made his way over and kicked back, starting up some friendly conversation with the wild-looking young man and his stoic seatmate. Meanwhile, Naruto had other ideas. Hi, is this seat taken? Asked Naruto, making a subtle polite gesture for the person's name. Oh Ino. Said the blonde girl from earlier, who was a bit caught off guard by the new boy's approach. So Ino, is it alright if I sit here? Smiled the blonde boy, guiding a hand toward the open spot next to the girl. Was all Ino could get out as she tried to think of what to say. Nervously, she glanced in the direction of Sasuke, as if she had done it so much that it was on reflex. She visibly flinched when she caught the boy looking right in her direction, sending her the most venomous glare she'd ever seen. Naruto, while not the most observant boy, noticed her tensing up when she looked away from him. He turned to see what gave her that reaction when he saw the look being directed toward them from the little jerk from earlier. It didn't take much to piece together what was going on. Man, when she didn't try and defend that prick earlier, I thought she might not have been one of his supporters. I guess I was wrong. It's alright. I can find somewhere else to sit. I understand. Sadly smiled the blonde boy, not wanting to come off more disappointed than he actually was. As Naruto made his way to the other empty seat at the row his brother was sitting at, the girl bit her lip in contemplation, trying to figure out what to say. When she finally made the attempt to respond, he was already seated next to the boy in the trench coat in the back row. Suffice to say, she felt like a heel for blowing him off like that. She glanced over at the lazy boy she belted earlier, Shikamaru, and noticed he was actually awake for once. When he locked eyes with Ino, he simply shook his head in disappointment. Yep, definitely a heel. Hey Naruto, are you alright? Asked Shiro. He had seen what just happened and was pretty pissed at the blonde girl for her attitude towards his brother. He'd also seen what was the catalyst for her behavior and became even angrier for her shallowness, not that he'd ever show it of course. Yeah, I'm good bro. No worries. Ending his statement with a fake laugh. Shiro definitely didn't buy that, but let it go for now. God, I hate when he does that. Stupid brat of a girl. Naruto's the nicest kid in the world and you practically ignored him to impress the biggest dickhead in the world. Teenagers suck. Hey man, don't sweat it. That girl's one of the golden boy's biggest fangirls. You're the first to get the short end of the stick talking with her. Stated the feral-looking boy at the table, followed by a yip of agreement from the puppy in his coat. Like I said, it's no big deal alright. This here is Inyazuka Kiba and his Ninka Nakamaru, and tall, dark, and silent over there is Aburame Shino. Said Shiro, directing his hand to the individuals as he introduced them. A Shiro and a Shino. Like that's not going to be goddamn confusing. Chuckled Naruto. Haha. Yeah, that's what I said. Laughed Kiba, slapping his hands together in amusement. I assure you, if you get us confused I won't take it as a personal insult. Calmly intoned Shino. I might. Snorted Shiro. Naruto and Kiba laughed along with him, with the feral young man throwing in a loud announcement of burn for good measure. Shino's reaction was a slight shake of the shoulders that might have indicated he was slightly chuckling, but who could tell really? You four in the back. Yelled Iruka, who was in the middle of a lecture. Yes, sensei? Asked the four boys in unison. Shut up. Yes, sensei. Chimed the boys, three of whom giving mock salutes. Once the Scarface instructor turned his attention back to his lesson, three of the boys snorted in amusement while the other simply sat quietly with a look of mirth on his face, at least for an Aburame anyway. The time spent between the new friends in the back row would continue with this trend well into lunch. When the lunch bell rung, everyone in the class let loose a sigh of happiness at the reprieve from listening to any more of Iruka's tedious lectures for an hour anyway. The boys, Naruto, Kiba, Shiro and Shino, followed the majority of the class to the rear of the building that led to a large training ground outside. Kiba, having scoped out a great spot in advance, directed his pack to a calm area of the yard under a few trees adjacent to the academy walls. Conversation was enjoyable, with much of Kiba and Naruto's laughing carrying all around the school grounds. It was turning out to be a very relaxing time amongst the new friends until Shiro caught sight of a certain cocky bastard and a large female entourage heading towards them. Can we help you, O great and powerful wizard of the Uchiha? Asked Shiro in a non-caring tone, not once looking up from his chocolate cake. BFFT, pretty funny for a loser. I came over here to lay down the law with you two disrespectful upstarts. Snorted Sasuke, crossing his arms and narrowing his eyes at the group of boys before him. Behind him, the high-pitched squeals of Sasuke is so cool could be painfully heard. Seriously, are you for real? Don't you have anything better to do? Like kick puppies or burn ants with a magnifying glass or something? Added Naruto in an annoyed tone as he set down his half-eaten bowl of ramen. He noticed Kiba and Shino narrow their eyes at him and then realized why. Oh sorry guys, bad analogies, he laughed Naruto as he sheepishly scratched his head. Look, go ahead with your superiority rant already, gay sauce. We're trying to enjoy our lunch if you hadn't noticed. Muttered the red-eyed Sarutobi, this time making eye contact with Sasuke with a bored look. I came here to issue a combat challenge actually. I'm here to show everyone, right now, just how much somebody from your pitiful clan can't stand up to an Uchiha. Watch your mouth, bastard. I'll take your jabs, but I'll be damned if I hear you insult my family. Growled Naruto in a frighteningly serious tone, jumping to his feet with icy blue eyes ablaze with barely restrained fury. Yeah, back off Uchiha. We're not in the mood for your shit today. Audibly snarled Kiba, jumping to his feet as well. Shino remained seated but nodded his agreement nonetheless. It was by this time that a bigger crowd began gathering around the boys, awaiting the bloodbath that they felt brewing. The tension was so thick, it was actually making the air denser. Breathing was literally becoming a workout. At least those besides Naruto and Shiro believed that was the reason for it. Back off. Make me. Or are you as weak and useless as that decrepit relic you call a grandfather who sits in the Hokage's chair? Sneered Sasuke, locking eyes with Naruto. It was after that comment that a deep thunderous growling was heard coming from the blonde boy. Many in the crowd were shivering from the inhuman sound, especially when they noticed his newly exposed longer than normal canines. The sight of him made a few take a step back, almost as if they were facing an animal ready to pounce his prey. It was hard to believe this was the same boy who was smiling and laughing not even a few minutes ago. Despite the intimidation, there were still a few brave, or stupid, individuals who acted like they weren't fazed and decided to speak up in their defiance. You can't scare Sasuke like that. It's utterly pathetic to think something like that'll work on him. Snapped the same pink-haired Sasuke fangirl from their class. Cries of support were heard from the other Uchiha supporters, except for a certain blonde girl who was desperately trying to hide herself in the sea of faces. The shrill banshee would have continued on her belittling tirade had it not been for the sudden surprise of feeling arms snaking around her waist and the sensation of warm breathing behind her right ear. Now princess, we can't go around insulting people like that. It's very unladylike. Whispered Shiro from behind the girl. He had an amused smirk, noticing the pinkette shiver slightly by his close contact. It was at this point that Sasuke glanced behind his back to observe the scene and barely concealed anger and shock. What the hell? How did he get around me? I didn't even see him move. The rest of the crowd had similar reactions except for Naruto, who simply watched with amusement. Once the girl regained her bearings, she growled in indignation and made to elbow the pervert for invading her private space like that. In the blink of an eye, the red-eyed boy blurred away in time to avoid the hit and would have appeared to have vanished completely had he not spoke up again. Why am I so violent? Everyone turned to a tree about 20 yards away to see a grinning Shiro hanging upside down on a tree branch using chakra. Again, almost everyone's reaction. So fast. You do know frowning causes wrinkles. Consider it sound medical advice from a professional. You can thank me later. Stated Shiro, taking on a lecturing pose as he defied gravity from the tree branch. She's got a cute face, but not much else going on below the neck. Felt like I was hugging a 2x4. After letting loose a shrill war cry, the pink-haired fangirl made a beeline toward the tree with the intent to maul the annoying asshole who just insulted her in public. All Shiro could do was chuckle at the girl, who was trying to jump and swipe at him as he waved mockingly. It was quite the hilarious sight for the onlookers, like a more amusing version of the game Keep Away. The crowd was brought out of their entertainment by a loud snort from Sasuke. At least the fool was good for getting rid of that annoying ditz. Smirked the cocky young man. Turning to lock eyes with Naruto once again, he added, besides, with him out of the way, we can finally see which of us truly stands above the other. I'm not going to fight you for your amusement, douchebag. I'm not like one your fangirls who do what you want because you tell them to. It was after this comment from Naruto that a certain blonde fangirl in the crowd visibly flinched. You make it sound like you have a choice. Intoned the Uchiha as his eyes went from its normal black to a deep crimson containing a single tomo that spun around the iris. So your eyes changed color. I'm waiting to be impressed. Deadpanned Naruto in a bored tone. Despite not acting impressed, the blonde knew exactly what he was seeing and upped his guard. So this is the Dijutsu that copies Jutsu, eh? Makes sense that this self-righteous fucker would have the Sharingan already, even if it's just at the first stage. In a raging fit, Sasuke charged at Naruto, launching a quick punch aimed for the blonde's face. In a show of relative ease, Naruto moved his head aside from the blow, letting it sail over his shoulder as he rounded his own fist underneath Sasuke's guard to connect under his chin. The Uchiha boy smirked as his Sharingan eyes caught the movement in advance and pumped his legs to back away from the blow, letting Naruto's fist sail right by his face. At least that's what was supposed to happen. To Sasuke's and almost everyone else's surprise, a distorted force of massive concussive power connected with the chin of the cocky black-haired boy a mere half-second after Naruto's fist had sailed by. The force of the blow was so strong that not only was the Uchiha sent flying up and back at a breakneck speed, but the ground in front of Naruto had upturned in a circular cone from the point of impact. After Sasuke finally landed about 40 yards away from where he was not even a few seconds prior, the crowd simply stood there flabbergasted at what they had just seen. All eyes went from the sprawled and bleeding Uchiha to the blonde-haired boy who stood behind the large gouges in the soil with a motionless look on his face as a slight airy distortion rotated around his body almost like an aura. The general consensus was that everything about him screamed control and power. Yes, as unbelievable as it looked, the infallible Uchiha had just been bested by a boy using a technique nobody had ever seen before without breaking a sweat. Their surprise was soon disrupted by the audible groaning of an injured Sharingan user, picking himself back up from ground and scowling with barely restrained rage toward the impassive blonde who just humiliated him. "You will not make a fool of me," screamed Sasuke as he blindly raced through hand seals Naruto was all too familiar with. "Shit. There's too many people in the path between me and him. Has he lost his mind? Damn it, no time. I've gotta use it before he kills somebody. I'm glad I still packed one for emergencies." Just as Sasuke finished on the tiger hand seal and took a deep breath, Naruto leapt in a single bound over the crowd, crouch landing in the path of the deranged Uchiha's attack, unfurling a sealing scroll that was tucked inside a pocket in his rust-orange track coat. "Pain. Gakakyu no Jutsu. Fire release. Great fireball technique," yelled Sasuke as he released a massive fireball from his mouth aimed at his quarry, caring little about the dumbstruck students who were rooted in place by shock in the way of his attack. Quickly, Naruto slammed his right hand onto the seal, pumping chakra into the glyph. "Suifuen. Kai. Water seal. Release," commanded Naruto as a torrent of water exploded from its containment. With precious few milliseconds left, he raced through the 3 hand seals he needed at an unreal speed, finishing his counter technique by pushing both hands forward in a stopping motion. His eyes set in a gaze of pure defiance and determination. This was the kind of thing he trained for. Suiten. Water release. The fire attack was so close by now that Naruto could literally feel the heat of the attack wafting onto him. But to him, in this kind of situation, failure was not an option. "Sujin Heki. Water encampment wall," roared the blonde, sweeping his hand in an upward motion bringing up a massive wall of the very water he unsealed, stopping the fiery assault dead in its tracks as it collided with the barrier with a loud hiss. The stunned crowd, who would have just been barbecued by Sasuke's onslaught, marveled at the display of raw ability demonstrated by their savior. None more than a certain blonde girl who stood wide-eyed at the boy's show of strength and courage defending a group of strangers, some of whom were just insulting him and defending Sasuke not too long before. "He just saved our lives and Sasuke just tried to kill me," were the only thoughts running through the girl's glazed mind after her near-death experience. Sasuke was equally surprised but was now twice as pissed. However, he wouldn't get the chance to mull over his anger as the blonde that had his ire suddenly dropped right in front of him with outstretched arms. "Duetin. Tatapa. Wind release. Great breakthrough," Naruto quietly intoned with a hardened gaze directed at a wide-eyed Sasuke. "Impossible. He didn't use hand seals." That was the Uchiha's last thought before the torrent of chakra-enhanced wind tossed the boy back with great force into a neighboring tree with a loud crack of flesh and bone against bark. Just as he was about to slide down, he was quickly grasped tightly by the throat and thrown roughly back into the tree with another loud snap. As he regained enough of his senses to focus, Sasuke observed the intensely angered face of one Sarutobi Naruto, who was slowly tightening the iron grip he had on the dark-haired boy's windpipe. "Give me one good reason why I shouldn't rip out your throat right now," growled Naruto lowly, fixing his icy gaze onto the bloodied face of the defeated Uchiha. Strong winds could be felt coming off of the blonde in stifling amounts, swirling and whipping around like a localized tornado. Sasuke was simply beside himself in anger, jealousy and fear at the commanding presence he was feeling from this boy who before seemed like nothing more than a foolish loudmouth clown. The only response he could give to Naruto's question was a series of chokes and a large glob of blood that poured from his mouth. Naruto was moments away from squeezing the life from the human scum until he felt a familiar presence come from behind placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let him go for now. We've got company," calmly spoke Jiro, motioning his head in the direction behind them. Naruto, without slacking his grip, turned to see what was going on. Numerous academy instructors, including Iruka himself, were tending to the students who were scattered about, relaying the events of the fight in various forms of detail. From what he could see, the teachers seemed none too thrilled that two students were using C and B class jutsu in a deadly backyard brawl. Acknowledging that the situation was being handled by the adults, albeit grudgingly, Naruto released the battered Uchiha and left the boy's crumpled and barely conscious form at the base of the tree as the blonde calmly walked away with his brother. "Aren't you going to fix him up?" evenly asked Naruto without turning around. "Looked fine to me," replied Jiro with a closed-eye smirk. As Naruto neared the gathered group of students and teachers, he braced himself for the enraged onslaught he expected to receive for battering of their prized jutsu-wielding Adonis. But as he locked eyes with some of the girls, boys and instructors, it wasn't anger he was seeing. They were smiling. Quite a few were even giving nods of gratitude and acknowledgement as he passed by. Even some of the Uchiha's fangirls came over and thanked him personally, with faint blushes on their faces while doing so. Hell, even Iruka came over personally to make sure Naruto wasn't hurt before begrudgingly having to tend to the seriously injured Sasuke. As he was nearing the place where he left his lunch, Kiba rushed Naruto and gave the blonde a congratulatory pat on the back, laughing and shouting about how cool it was to see that prick get his ass handed to him like that. Shino, in his infinite stoicism, remained quiet but still gave Naruto a thoughtful nod for defending many of his classmates. It goes without saying. All this praise was pretty overwhelming for the blonde Sarutobi. While all this was going on, Jiro was standing off to the side chuckling softly as he observed his brother's bashfulness at all the attention he was receiving. Well, even though we couldn't keep ourselves incognito for long, it was just a matter of time before something like this happened. He might be a big goof who lives for this kind of attention, but nobody else is more deserving of the recognition. After all, he is my brother, a true defender, the makings of future leader. The red-eyed boy smiled at that thought. As Naruto was enjoying a lively and enthusiastic discussion with Kiba about how he knew how to perform sealing techniques, the blonde was brought out of his reverie by the faint sound of crying. Extending his already sharp hearing with chakra, he caught the clear sound of a girl crying coming from the direction of one of the nearby trees. Waving his friend off for the time being and promising to meet back up later, he quietly made his way over to see who it was who was so upset. Sure enough, when he moved past the tree, he caught sight of the blonde girl from his class, slumped against the trunk, sniffling with tears running down her face. "Hey Ino, are you alright? You're not hurt, are you?" Naruto asked kindly, hoping not to scare the poor girl away. "Oh no, I'm not hurt. I choked," the blonde girl in surprise, tears not show signs of stopping. "First time, huh? First time what?" said the girl, locking her light blue eyes with Naruto's own deep ceruleans. "Facing death. Especially from someone you admire," he answered evenly. "Wait, how did you know?" "Because I had the exact same reaction you had when it first happened to me. I think I cried for days afterward," stated the boy, looking down sadly. "I can tell they don't teach you these kinds of things here in school, so when stuff like this happens it's hard to be prepared for it," finished Naruto as he sat himself next to the distraught Ino. "Wanna talk about it?" he asked, looking back to meet her gaze. I never knew that Sasuke would ever attack any of us like that. He just didn't care. He didn't care if he killed us just to get at you. It was like we didn't exist. Like we were worthless." She quietly replied shamefully, the last parts of her answer done in a whispered, lifeless tone. "You're not worthless," half-shouted Naruto, partially startling Ino with the tone of his voice. "He's just a sick little bastard who gets off on hurting others and putting them down. I can tell that nobody has ever stood up to him either, and he's probably let that fact feed his ego too." And with all the conviction he could muster, he continued, "You don't need to worry about him anymore. As long as me and my brother are here, he'll never attack any of you like that again. That's a promise," smiled Naruto. The girl didn't know how to respond to that. She just stared into this strange boy's blue eyes with an expression of wide-eyed awe. For most of her time spent at the academy, she'd only known coldness and apathy chasing down Sasuke, even if it was just for popularity points with the other girls. She just wasn't used to anybody, let alone somebody she barely knew, being able to understand her and offer a kind ear that would listen to her problems. Why would he even care? Didn't she blow him off earlier when all he wanted to do was sit next to her? Didn't he see her among the group of Sasuke's fangirls earlier? She eventually broke herself from her deep thoughts and responded. Sorry, I must look like a real mess right now," laughed Ino embarrassingly as she wiped more tears from her eyes. "You look pretty good to me," grinned Naruto, just barely observing the girl blushing at his compliment. "Here, dry your eyes and I'll meet you back inside in a bit. Sound good?" "Yay, and thanks Naruto for listening. It helped a lot." Ino warmly smiled. "No prob, Ino-chan. If you wanna talk again you know where to find me," smiled Naruto with equal warmth as he helped the girl stand on her feet, hardly noticing the even redder blush on her face after hearing him give her the personal suffix to her name. After waving goodbye to the girl, as she walked away, the blonde boy let out an exasperated sigh and without turning around, addressed the nosy eavesdropper who was currently lying down on a branch in a nearby tree. "You think for once you could give me a moment of alone time?" groaned Naruto. "What? And miss the romantic moment you two just shared? Not on your life, Skippy," chuckled Shiro. "Odd, you're such a dick. I was just trying to calm the girl down, it wasn't what you were thinking." "Oh really? What was I thinking then?" leered Shiro as he jumped off the branch back down to the ground next to his annoyed brother. "Just shut up. Now you're being a pest," growled Naruto as he turned to walk back to the academy building. "The SSST, hey spaz, guess who I am? Oh my god, you just saved me from that horrible fireball. Watch as I tear off my clothing and give you some hot loving as thanks, my big macho hero man," laughed Shiro after saying the line in an exaggerated high-pitched female voice while making damsel in distress gestures. "RAWWWR. That's it. You're so dead, asshole," rounded Naruto as he gave chase toward his annoying jackass of a brother who was making a mad dash up the side of the academy wall toward the open window of their classroom. "You ha 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 ha. Save me. Save me, my blonde Superman. Hurry. Ha 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 ha," cried Shiro in the same taunting shrill female voice, laughing as he dove into the classroom and dodging a quick swipe from his brother. Down below, the other students, who were still filing back into the building, just stared with confusion toward the window where the two odd brothers had just jumped through. The sound of screaming, laughing and various objects breaking and crashing was all they heard as everyone simply shook their heads in exasperation. The whole event was perfectly summed up by the statement of a certain lazy academy student amongst those proceeding back inside. "Troublesome." Luckily, for the boys anyway, the rest of the day went by far more quietly and without incident. Sasuke was sent home early to have his wounds tended, as well as serve the week-long suspension for using a C-class offensive fire jutsu against classmates. Iruka intended on giving a much heavier penalty, but he was overruled by the Uchiha-friendly academy headmasters, who deemed that any other punishment besides what was given would have been unjust for a model student. The scarred Chunin was not pleased. Naruto spent most of the class feeling the stares of his classmates. Some of awe, others of infatuation, and the rest just curiosity. Even his new acquaintance Ino was sending him intense looks, ones if he caught, she would immediately turn away. Yeah, attention was something Naruto enjoyed, but this was ridiculous. Fortunately, with friends like Kiba, who could take your mind off anything with a good perverse joke every so often, Naruto found a nice outlet to distract himself for the rest of the day. Shiro kicked back and relaxed for the rest of the day, striking up interesting conversations with Shino. The red-eyed Sarutobi was quite interested in hearing about the Aburam clan and their interesting form of combat using Kikai insects, which the clan members keep inside their bodies symbiotically. For a medical nut like him, Shiro enjoyed the intelligent discussion about how the trench-coat-wearing boy survived having his body being used as a living hive. The Aburam himself enjoyed talking with someone who didn't think all of it was gross. Eventually, it came time for school to finally let out. After saying their goodbyes to both Kiba and Shino, the Sarutobi brothers began their trek back home at a more relaxing pace than this morning. Conversation between the two was typical. Insults riddled with innuendo and mirthful sarcasm. It was about halfway through their walk that Shiro suddenly stopped and turned his narrowed gaze towards the roof of a building adjacent to the street they were on. Naruto caught this and inquired, "What's up?" After a few seconds of scanning with his blood-red eyes, Shiro, despite not being convinced that he didn't sense somebody following them, decided to let it go for now and shook his head, "Nothing. Must have been the wind." Shrugging, Naruto accepted the answer, "Well, hurry up, we're gonna miss dinner." As the boys resumed their travels, a shadowy figure slowly emerged from behind the base of a water tower on the roof Shiro had just scrutinized. The details of the person's appearance remained ambiguous, well hidden by the darkness of the dusky afternoon. Aside from a barely noticeable smirk, the only other detail that was observable was the figure's eyes. A fully evolved Sharingan. "Welcome home, boy." 1 week later, Sarutobi residence. "We need to tell the boys." Sarutobi Asuma was sitting quietly at the kitchen table, mulling over details in his report for the B-rank escort mission he, Izumo and Katetsu just returned from, when he heard his wife speak up as she sat herself down across from him. Without looking up from the paperwork, Asuma replied, "I'll sit them down and give them the lay of the land soon. But right now it's too early for them to handle that kind of information." "Are you nuts?" shrieked Kurenai, completely surprised by her better half's nonchalance. In a more subdued but resolute tone she continued, "Asuma, these are our boys. They need to be prepared if the Uchiha make a move." "I understand that, but they aren't even genin yet," responded the chain-smoking Jonin. Finally looking up from his report, he looked his wife straight in the eye and elaborated, "What we know about the attack is SS-class blackout information that most Jonin aren't privy to. It's too soon and we can't risk a leak." "Okay, now where the hell did that come from?" frowned Kurenai. So you're pretty much saying you can't trust either of them. Is that it? Responded Kurenai, red eyes narrowed dangerously towards her husband. Naruto is a target and Shiro is collateral as far as those bastards are concerned. I don't care about secrets or protocol, so if you won't tell them then I sure as hell will. Scowled the red-eyed mother, upset that her husband in this matter would act so by the book. It almost reminded her of his father. Perplexed by his wife's imperative to reveal everything to their sons, Asuma became increasingly concerned. Why this all of a sudden? Did something happen while I was gone? No, fortunately nothing happened yet. At that, Kurenai relaxed her features and in a more vulnerable tone continued, I don't know I have an awful feeling about this and I know it has to do with the boys. The more time that's passed since we were told about this uprising, the more worried I've been getting. Keeping Naruto and Shiro in the dark hasn't been helping this feeling go away. Mother's intuition. Smirked Asuma, concealing his own worries. And a ninja's paranoia. Please, just back me up on this. I don't want to be the only one here willing to tell them. They look up to you. They need to hear it from you much more than me. Pleaded Kurenai, hoping to garner her husband's support in this decision. Nai-chan, now you're playing to my vanity. That's just cheating. Chuckled the male Sarutobi. Feeling his resolve in the argument being disarmed by the concerned ruby eyes of his loving wife, Asuma reached across the table and grasped Kurenai's hand in his own and in a somewhat apologetic tone replied, but when they get home tonight, together we'll both sit them down and tell them. Alright. Finishing his statement with a warm smile. Brightening up by her husband's decision, Kurenai gave his hand a loving squeeze and returned an equally warm smile in agreement. Turning back to his report, Asuma frowned as his thoughts drifted more and more toward the unanswered questions about the approaching dangers that lie ahead. If only we knew the full extent as to why they want Naruto. Merchant District. Konoha. I am so bored. Bored. The annoyed words coming from the lone blonde teenager as he walked the commercial boardwalk of Konoha left very little guesswork about his current feelings. Yes, the young Sarutobi Naruto was in fact incredibly bored. And rightfully so, as his thoughts gave way to a more organized synopsis of how this situation of his came to be. So let's see. Kiba and Shino are both out, stuck training with their clans. Super Aji-san is boned with paperwork again. And last but not least, the asshole is tacking his med certification finals. Ugh, this is gonna be a long day. Unbeknownst to the preoccupied blue-eyed Sarutobi, a shadowy group of individuals continued their pursuit of the unsuspecting boy. This organized team, using every bit of their stealth prowess from past experience, kept pace with their target, taking extra care not to give away their position while maintaining their surveillance. Their movement flawless. Their use of the environment shockingly efficient. Truly, they are a force to be reckoned with. But like any team, it's only as strong as its weakest link. Achoo. Turning around to properly bless the person he overheard sneezing, Naruto instead groaned at the sight he had spent the better part of the last week avoiding. The sight of his rabid fangirls. Yes, not even 20 yards away, trying to use trash cans as cover, was a group of 5 young girls scowling at a 6th girl who was currently wiping her nose sheepishly. Since his debut at the academy, Naruto has become the talk of the schoolyard. Not only did he easily outclass the vaunted Uchiha Sasuke in combat, but he had heroically protected his classmates who were unwittingly caught in the crossfire of their battle. Combine that with his kind personality, handsome looks, and his relation to the Hokage, and you have the ingredients for certified fangirl worship, much to the annoyance of the boy in question. Ugh, them again. I don't mind the attention, but seriously, they don't even try to get to know me. All they do is follow me and watch me, it's freaking creepy. Bless you. Was all a confused Naruto could say in the current awkwardness of the situation. Ski. Was the high-pitched chorused response from all 6 girls. The blonde boy with his built-up immunity to the sonic attack merely grimaced and popped his ears while dogs nearby could be heard yowling. Naruto-kun is so well-mannered. Sasuke never ever acted so concerned for our well-being as much as you do, Naruto-kun. Proclaimed the sole red-headed girl, leading the group of girls slowly toward the blonde boy. He really, it's no big deal. I mean, someone sneezed so I said bless you. See, nothing to get all excited about. Laughed Naruto nervously, waving his hands in front of him in a placating manner as he began backing away. He's so modest. Cooed the Jasper brunette girl, taking one step closer to Naruto. He's so kind. Smiled the strawberry blonde dreamily as she too took a step forward. He's so yummy. Hungrily grinned the black-haired girl as she paced herself even closer. We love you, Naruto-kun. Cheered all 6 girls as they made their mad dash to glomp the retreating Sarutobi boy. Oh shit. Shouted Naruto, stunned by the estrogen-fueled teenage onslaught charging at his person. Using his shinobi instincts to shake off his moment of shock, the blonde back flipped away from his pursuers, grasping to the wall of an adjacent merchant building using chakra, then springboarding onto the roof to make his escape. All he could hear as he leapt from roof to roof were cheers of "Naruto-kun is so cool" and "Naruto-kun is amazing," giving the poor lad shivers thinking of what would have happened if he didn't get away. Holy hell. What is up with Konoha's kunoichi anyway? If I'm not being molested by women mom's age, I'm being gang raped by girls from class. I know I'm awesome, but geez, this is a bit nuts. Brought out of his thoughts, Naruto once again heard more squeals of infatuation from the girls in the retreating distance. With a cringe, he redoubled his efforts to flee. God damn it, I'll never catch a break with those Sukubi are on the loose. Ugh, sad as it is, at least that kinda gave me something to do for a bit sorta. Man, this is beyond sad. Feeling that he had shaken off his pursuers, Naruto came to a halt near the edge of the roof he was currently on. Finding familiarity with the area he blindly arrived at, he came to a simple solution to his predicament. Fuck it, I'm near the training grounds. Might as well blow off some steam. Resuming his trek with a goal in mind, Naruto bounded off towards the secluded area where he knew he could entertain himself and hide from his devoted groupies at the same time. Resuming his contemplative thinking as he sailed from building to building, the blonde Sarutobi was too blind to realize that he had not shaken off all of his pursuers. I wonder how the asshole is doing. Konoha General Hospital. Virgin, 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 gay, virgin, flaming gay, virgin. These were the quiet observations of one Sarutobi Jiro as he kicked back at his desk, taking notice of the other aspiring medics in the room, waiting to take the written part of their certifications. One might think that someone who had not done the deed himself should be considered a bit of a hypocrite to judge others of the same status of sexual activity. However, when you're 13 and these assumptions are being made of those 5+ years older than yourself, you consider yourself exempt from being at fault from your lack of action. At least that's how Shiro thought about it anyway. The red-eyed Sarutobi was brought out of his musings by the approach of one of the test proctors holding a trash can. Excuse me, but you're going to have to discard any and all non-essentials for the test, please. Shiro simply shifted his eyes to stare confusingly annoyingly into the ones shielded by the pair of wire-rimmed round glasses owned by the proctor. I have no clue what you're talking about. Discard what and why? Somewhat miffed by this red-eyed boy's nonchalance, the young proctor clarified by reaching over and pulling out the trademark toothpick that was wedged in Shiro's teeth. This is what I mean. Nobody is allowed to possess items like this to prevent the chance of cheating. Shifting himself out of his relaxed position to stare intently at the older boy, Shiro in mock confusion commented, "Okay, so let me get this straight. You think I can cheat with a goddamn toothpick?" At this, the proctor nodded in the affirmative. "Want my pencil? Careful, it might be an explosive note," sarcastically muttered Shiro, backing away from the pencil on his desk as if it would explode. "Cute," dryly replied the annoyed proctor. He was about to trash the boy's pick when he caught a strong scent wafting from it. Cautiously he brought it to his nose and sniffed it like it was a narcotic, much to the amusement of Shiro. "What the hell is that chocolate?" "Right you are, Skippy," grinned Shiro. Taking on his signature condescending lecture pose, he elaborated, "It's my own creation. Dentalware with a glorious flavor of chocolate. Patent pending, so don't get any ideas." "This is perhaps the stupidest thing I have ever seen," muttered the dumbstruck test proctor. "PFFT, that's because you're not sitting where I'm sitting," quietly snorted Shiro. "What was that?" questioned the older boy in a chilled tone. "Sup?" feigned Shiro. "Gee, never mind. Good luck on your test," icily responded the thoroughly annoyed test manager as he turned to continue his rounds in the room. When the coast was finally clear, Shiro snared another of his prized flavored toothpicks from his jacket pocket and popped it back in his mouth. After kicking back once again, the red-eyed Sarutobi snickered as he thought about the little encounter he just had. Silver hair and a ponytail, wearing a purple jumpsuit. Ladies and gentlemen, behold. A gay virgin. Training ground 22. It didn't take long for the exuberant blonde to reach his destination of the training ground he had come to favor since arriving in Konoha. Naruto was told by his grandfather, as per his request, that these grounds were the second most secluded of all the others, perfect for the aspiring ninja who wishes to hide his true ability from the eyes of others. After all, a ninja is only as strong as his abilities in subterfuge and misdirection. So with its location near the outskirts of the city limits and its boundary of very thick woodland, privacy is what this training area has in spades. The only other area considered more private was ground 22. Well, let's just say with a name like Forest of Death, the atmosphere sounded less than inviting to the young man. Settling his expedient pace to that of a simple walk through the dense foliage of the wooded training ground, the young Sarutobi let his senses indulge in the serenity of nature. The cool noon breeze, the smell of conifer needles and dried autumn leaves, the sound of combat. Oh, wonderful. Sounds like somebody already called dibs on the joint. Ugh, might as well see if the dude's almost done, or maybe see if he wants to train in with me. God knows I got nothing else to do." As Naruto made his way to the edge of the secluded training area, he hopped onto an adjacent tree branch along the border to get an objective look of the trainee who he had just overheard. Now that he saw who it was, he realized some very startling details he wasn't expecting. First detail. The person training was his age. Second detail. The person training was in fact not a dude. Third detail. The person training was familiar. Well, this is interesting. I think this is the first time I've run into her outside of class. She seems to be having trouble with her taijutsu. The form is basic, but her execution is definitely out of whack. She does make it look good though, damn good. Wow, she is flexible, very flexible shit. Bad thoughts. Gah. The asshole's influence is strong even when he's not around. Shaking himself out of his compromising internal monologue, the energetic blonde decided to announce his arrival in typical Naruto fashion. Loudly, "Hey. Ino-chan," said girl, who was bent down panting, having spent the better part of the last few hours bruising her forearms and shins on wooden dummies in a supposed private training ground, jerked her head up, hearing her name being shouted out. Of all the individuals in the village, she had hoped it wasn't him that was here to see her in such rough and unkempt shape. "Then Naruto?" "Oh hey Naruto," answered the platinum blonde, desperately trying to straighten herself out for the approaching boy, but failing miserably. "No. I thought this was a private training area. I didn't want anybody seeing me like this. He probably saw me and my pathetic taijutsu kata practice, plus I look like hell. Think Ino think. Oh no, he's coming closer. Now what do I do? What do I say?" Ino's frantic internal turmoil was interrupted by her fellow blonde speaking. "Wow, you look like you've been busy out here for a while already," smiled Naruto, keeping his eyes glued to Ino's. Somewhat surprised that he didn't scrutinize her appearance with a once-over like most guys would, Ino answered, well, I've been out here since morning, so. You know me, gotta keep active." Laughed the girl nervously, since what she just said was almost a blatant lie. Almost being the key word. "No doubt. So do you train here often?" asked the darker blonde, already knowing the real answer, but doing his best not to make Ino feel uncomfortable. "I know I shouldn't keep prodding her like this, but I can see that look. She's trying really hard to hide it, but it's there. She needs to let it out, or she's just gonna crawl inside herself and shut everyone out. Luckily I've had enough practice with these kinds of situations, just can't push too hard." But that question hanging in the air, the young girl paused before replying, as if to decide between providing the truth or dodging it with another half-lie. "This is so embarrassing, I shouldn't lie to him. He told me I could trust him if I needed to talk to him about stuff. And he seems like a genuinely nice guy. Maybe I could just come out with it. But what if he laughs at me, or what if he thinks I'm weak? He wouldn't be the first guy to call me that." With noticeable hesitation, Ino reluctantly admitted, well, to be honest, this is the first time I've trained in the last few months." Finishing her statement with an ashamed tone. "Well, that's nothing to be upset about. You must have been injured or really busy or something to miss so much. Totally understandable. Hell, I missed 6 months of solid game time because I fell off a mountain doing chakra control exercises." Laughed Naruto, hoping to cheer the girl up with tales of his antics. Slightly giggling hearing that little tidbit of his past, Ino sighed as she looked away from Naruto, preparing to end the deception of what was really going on. "I wish it were like that. You'll probably think it's pretty dumb, but I hadn't trained because I partially losing her nerve to admit the skeleton in her closet." She muttered the last part out quietly. "I was distracting myself with Sasuke." "I know." Shrugged Naruto nonchalantly. "Be what?" blinked Ino, confusedly. "I said I know. Don't take this the wrong way, but I had a feeling the reason was something along those lines. I could tell just by the way you were moving earlier that it wasn't injury related," replied the blonde boy, locking eyes with the young girl in his company with a soft expression. "Then why did you ask that if you already knew?" asked Ino in an ashamed tone. "I might come off as someone with the observational skills of a doorknob, but I can see underneath when I want to. I could tell you were being self-conscious about the real reason, so I gave you an out if you weren't comfortable telling me. I may not like lies, but I can see when somebody isn't ready to admit something personal, and I definitely wouldn't push it if I can help it," explained Naruto, hoping his reasons didn't come off the wrong way, alienating a possible friend in the process. Am I really that transparent and pathetic? Am I that starved for attention that I'm leaking pity like a broken faucet? Thought the blonde girl, fighting the difficult battle to contain the tears that threatened to pour from her teal eyes. Why, you must think it's pretty pathetic, right? A silly fangirl who diets herself sick and spends no time doing what she's supposed to do simply to fit in and be accepted by those who could care less about you. Choked the young girl, the once restrained tears finally leaking from her teal eyes. "Even my dad is disappointed in me for slacking off for the Uchiha. Dad was my whole reason for trying to become a ninja and joining the academy in the first place. I wanted to make him proud and show him that I could carry on the Yamanaka legacy as the next heir, but I lost sight of that as I got older. I don't even know why I'm admitting to this by now." Ino could not hold back her crying and ashamedly turned her gaze away from the young man who she silently respected. She was shocked to feel a comforting hand come to rest on her shoulder and turned around to once again meet the kind and sympathetic blue eyes of one Sarutobi Naruto. It's not good to hold it all in, you know. I'm glad you told me the truth. Yeah, we don't know each other that well yet, but it's nice to know on some level you trust me enough to confide in me. Warmly smiled the blonde Sarutobi. But that's just it. I know enough about you to know you're way ahead of anybody else in our class. You could probably make Chunin right now if you wanted to. You weren't afraid facing Sasuke. You held your ground while I stood there like a small child waiting for either death or somebody to rescue me. What kind of ninja am I? Hysterically cried Ino, losing herself to her own personal demons. Choking back a sob, she added in a more subdued tone, seeing me like this and knowing the reason why, I'm surprised you bother to care, since I'm a mockery of something you take seriously. Choked Ino, desperately trying to sink into herself much like a certain Hyuga girl, for very similar reasons. It was after that entire statement Naruto realized the entire reason for this broken girl's change of heart in regards to her lifestyle. He had seen the onset of her self-loathing shortly after the Uchiha incident, and it didn't take a genius or prodigy to know that a near-death experience like that would give a person an eye-opener on the direction their life was taking. After all, when your life flashes before your eyes and you're disappointed with how it's played out, when given a second chance you tend not to waste the opportunity to fix your mistakes. She doesn't want to be a damsel in distress anymore. She wants to make her father proud of her. She wants to feel whole again. You're right, I don't care. Chuckled Naruto and elaborated his meaning seeing the girl's shocked and even more depressed look. I don't care that you've made bad decisions. I respect you more that you're trying so hard to fix them. I know for a fact that there's others that enjoy stunting their growth chasing that bastard and will continue to do it blindly. You said screw him and moved on looking to improve yourself. Warmly smiled Naruto, giving the blonde girl's shoulder a reassuring squeeze, eliciting a blushed response. But still I'm not even close to being where I should be. Admitted Ino quietly. I'll be blunt. Yeah, you're behind in a lot and yeah, 4 months isn't enough time to catch up by yourself. Stated Naruto, taking on a serious thinking pose. But luckily that's what I'm here for. Cheered the boy, pumping his fist in the air. Huh? Was Ino's meaningful response. Training alone is boring. Droned out the blue-eyed boy. We could train together and I can help you with the things you're struggling with. Plus we can keep this between us so nobody else has to know what you're doing and why. Not to mention, how cool would it be to wow everyone come exam time with a new and improved Super Ninja version of Ino? Widely grinned the enthusiastic young man, not realizing through his entire spiel that he kept his hand on the shoulder of a blushing Ino. It'll be kick-ass. So how about it, Ino-chan? Asked Naruto as he removed the hand on Ino's shoulder to give the girl a corny thumbs up, much to the girl's unconscious disappointment. Whether it was the removal of the hand or the thumbs up is anybody's guess, but won't I be holding you back? DFT hell no. Replied Naruto, waving off Ino's concerns. I might be 8 kinds of awesome, but I'm not dumb enough to think I'm a master of everything. I bet there's things you could teach me just as there's things I can teach you. It's all give and take. Why does he care so much and how does he keep finding ways to cheer me up? I'm so confused this feeling I get around him, but deep down I know I can trust him. Mulling over those loose thoughts, Ino with an air of determination responded. I guess when you put it like that. Yeah, sure, why not? I'm in. Grinned the markedly more cheerful platinum blonde girl. Sweet. Now we're talking, girl. You won't regret it. And thanks again, Naruto-kun. For listening. Shyly thanked the girl. You're very welcome. Nodded Naruto with a warm grin. Following a clap of preparation, the boy shouted, alright. Now let's warm up with 500 push-ups. Hoo-ah. As he dropped down and began his rapid succession of sets. All Ino could do was groan cutely as she got into proper position. Oh god, what did I get myself into? So much for regrets in my nails. Konoha General Hospital. Looks like we're about to take the trip to Tuna Town. Fellas. Snickered Shiro mirthfully in regards to the interesting patients each and every aspiring medic in the room was given to revive. Unfortunately, with the incredibly tense atmosphere and serious demeanors of almost every other participant, his humor went unnoticed. In fact, most of those around our red-eyed protagonist simply sneered and gave haughty reactions to his lack of professionalism for something as serious as the medical field. All Shiro could do was deadpan and shiver at how much colder the room had gotten after a simple filthy joke that was meant to loosen everyone up. Didn't they know humor was always the best medicine? The FFT, who am I kidding? I'm betting the only vagina these tools ever laid eyes on was in a medical journal. Muttered the Sarutobi medic under his breath while rolling his eyes in an annoyed fashion. Good afternoon, Sarutobi-sama. Groaning at the sama suffix that had been steadily growing to be a bane of his existence, Shiro turned to address the proctor of the second part of his exam, who oddly enough was dressed similarly to the one from the first part. I am Tsurugi Miss Yumi, and I will be personally overseeing your practical examination today. Before we begin, do you have any questions? Politely asked the masked, slightly older bespectacled young man. Yeah, just one there, masked Avenger. Why the hell are we wasting time healing fish when we could be, oh I don't know, healing real patients? Questioned the clearly irritated red-eyed Sarutobi, if the blatant sarcastic tone and constant flicking of the toothpick in his mouth was any indication. The answer is quite simple actually. Replied the masked proctor, readjusting his glasses as if to begin a lecture. The classifications of medical licenses are based on tiers of healing potential. If you perform at this stage well enough, I will recommend you be upgraded to perform a more complex demonstration of your potential on a live patient. We mainly do this as to avoid those with limited skill from further injuring patients if they are incapable of performing the healing necessary. So in layman's terms, you're weeding out the posers from the real big fish. Reasserted Shiro in understanding, barely containing the chill of shame for using a bad pun. Precisely. Any other questions? Nah, I'm set. Stated the young medic in training. Cracking his knuckles in preparation he proclaimed, let's jumpstart this anchovy so I can do some serious work. Seeing his proctor assume the standard grading position with his clipboard in hand, Shiro proceeded to perform a single tiger hand seal and point his pointer and middle finger towards the gills of the salmon situated on the operating table. It was clear that the boy was performing the Shaosen no Jutsu, mystical palm technique, if the intense glowing green chakra at his fingertips were any indication. However, what wasn't clear to Miss Yumi was why he was not using both palms to focus the effect, as is the standard for its usage. It was during these thoughts that Shiro decided to speak up and explain his performance without taking his eyes off his patient. Shaosen no Jutsu, while effective in its current raw form, is a gas guzzler and way too imprecise in its healing. These are two faults most medics don't have the luxury of dealing with, as most have pitiful chakra reserves and no time to screw around. Began Shiro, with an air of seriousness and focus in his tone of voice. Not showing any of the signs of fatigue usually associated with conventional use of the technique, he continued his explanation with his gaze still locked onto his task. Medical ninjutsu theory has grown complacent and little to no breakthroughs have been made in nearly 15 years. People think that because something works most of the time that it doesn't require fixing. Continued Shiro, venomously spitting out each word in a jaded tone. If one were to have looked into his eyes as he said this, they might have caught a small hint of sadness and regret. The Shaosen saturates the wound or defect in the body with a large amount of healing chakra, hoping its wide effect through the use of both palms will solve the problem. Overkill on a resource that's already in short supply is both stupid and irresponsible. So I've refined it to be much lighter on chakra cost and more pinpoint, but requiring an even higher amount of chakra control and anatomical knowledge in order for it to work. This is my upgraded version, the Myakusen no Jutsu, mystical pulse technique. After all, why use a Gakakyu, fireball, on fly, when you only need a fly swatter? Smirked the red-eyed healer, all seriousness gone. As he did this, the fish under his care began to flop wildly around on the table after its sudden revival. The shock of these events weighed heavily on the mind of a seriously flabbergasted veteran medic. Incredible. He revived the salmon in nearly half the time it normally takes using conventional healing methods. And he doesn't even appear remotely exhausted. This is an enormous medical discovery. The master would be quite interested in this new development. Kukikuku. With his fingers still positioned over the fish after deactivating the chakra pulse, Shiro cocked his thumb up, making clicking sounds followed by a bang. Can I cook or can't I, masked Avenger? As he blew imaginary smoke from his fingertips and turned to smirk at his stunned proctor. Indeed, Sarutobi-sama, indeed. I must say I'm incredibly impressed by this revision you have made, as well as the advanced properties it focuses on. Would you be willing to document the technique to be incorporated into standard Konoha medical training? Asked Misumi, just barely able to contain the sinister hunger in his voice. Class 3 license and you've got a deal specs. Smirked the young Sarutobi, outstretching his hand expectantly. Is he bribing me? Deadpanned the masked medic with irritation. Yes, I'm bribing you. And no, I have no shame. Cheekily grinned Shiro, giving little in his expression to betray his actual thoughts. I was going to document it for the village's use it anyway. Of course his butt-kissing ass doesn't know that, haha. Still, something about this joker gives me a bad vibe. I'll have to be careful about using my other techniques around him. Making an annoyed hum sound as he stared into the unflinching eyes of his junior charge, Misumi turned his gaze to his clipboard and with a few hesitant strokes of his pen, made a few notes and checks on Shiro's test sheet. After what seemed like forever, the proctor scanned the rest of the sheet and looked back up to an expectant-looking Shiro to render his decision. You are quite the enigma, Sarutobi-sama. Even without the blackmail, your demonstration was more than enough to warrant the upgrade regardless. In any event, I have found you fit for active medical duty under Class 3 privilege. Congratulations. Acknowledged the elder boy as he handed the signed document to the grinning, spiky-haired boy. Awesome. Now that the pleasantries are out of the way, I can say this to you without the fear of being failed. Smirked Shiro, with a malicious glint in his eye. What would that be, Sarutobi-sama? Asked Misumi while adjusting his glasses, barely catching the slight frustrated grumble coming from the other boy after hearing his name being said in that way. Simple. You call me Sarutobi-sama one more time, and the next time you wake up you'll be sporting double D tits and a tuck job. Savvy? Threatened Shiro through gritted teeth, adding emphasis by taking both hands and squeezing them over his chest. I understand except the word savvy. Super. Now point me to patient number 1 please. But Sarutobi-san, you just passed, there's no need to demonstrate on a live. Wrong. Rudely interrupted the red-eyed medic, throwing his palm to Misumi's face to halt him mid-sentence. I just wanted to get that bureaucratic red tape bullshit you call it test out of the way as fast as possible, so I can get real work done. People need healing, and now I'm licensed with a full tank of gas. So let's get cracking. Finished Shiro, with a preparatory cracking of his knuckles to further emphasize his eagerness. Answering the enthusiasm of our protagonist with another which Shiro was beginning to find just as annoying as hearing his name said with the sama suffix, Misumi flipped through a few pages of his clipboard until he landed on a page that caught his eye. With a slight hesitation, the older medic tore it off from the group of papers and handed it to the expectant Sarutobi brother. Now while normal protocol disallows immediate fielding of newly certified medics, I believe you've shown yourself capable of immediate placement. So what? Do I owe you a coke then? Muttered an irritated Shiro while crossing his arms. What? Does this goober think he's doing me a favor by giving me permission to treat patients? God, I hate this self-important douche. Becoming agitated with his young charge's sarcasm, Misumi handed Shiro the sheet. Right, well this will start you off small for now. Here is the preliminary diagnosis report for your patient, who you will find waiting in exam room 305, about 2 floors down. And with a clearly condescending tone he finished with a good luck. The FTE, with the senseis I've had, I realized a long time ago that luck and being a medic do not go hand in hand. But thanks for showing you care. And as he grabbed the sheet, he reached into his thigh pouch and handed his proctor a small chocolate. Here's a candy for being such a good boy. All this was followed by Shiro patting a growling Misumi on the head like a small child as he made his way out of the exam foyer. Once outside the double doors, the red-eyed Sarutobi brother took in a deep breath, held it, then released it, clearing out the hidden strain his nerves had taken throughout his test. Lifting his gaze with crimson eyes ablaze with focus and determination, Sarutobi Shiro took his first step in the direction of his new future. I'll make you proud, Ni-chan. Training ground 22. Can we please stop for just a bit to catch my breath, wheezed a frightfully worn-out Yamanaka Ino as she dejectedly trudged to finish her assigned 500 jabs on her training log. But Ino-chan, we're only half done. Replied Naruto in a tone completely opposite of his female training partner as he too continued to thrust his fists into the beaten lumber. He knew he was pushing her harder than she was truly prepared for in her current state, but to a glutton for punishment like our favorite blonde protagonist, he felt this pace would give her character. You can't give in yet, girl. We still haven't gotten to the, but Naruto never got the chance to finish his statement before he heard an abrupt thud that came from Ino dropping to the ground in an unceremonious panting heap. Tree walking exercises yet, but the end of that statement, Ino, while unable to form words in between breaths, gave the blue-eyed boy a sharp glare that said enough is enough, you fucking lunatic. Haha, of course a 5-minute break sounds good too. Chuckled our blonde protagonist nervously as he scratched the back of his head. From her position on the ground, and after a few seconds to recatch her breath, Ino in an incredulous tone shouted, where the hell do you get the energy for all this? We've been at it for almost 3 hours straight. I can barely move. Across town at the Konoha hospital, a familiar red-eyed boy was descending down one of the stairwells when he sneezed involuntarily. My smarta sense is tingling. Somebody said something with a heavy sexual connotation and I'm not there to capitalize on it. Damn, no time to dwell on it, running late enough as it is. Shunshin time. One hand sign later and he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Back at training ground 22. Word? It's been 3 hours already. Wow, time sure flies when you're having fun, huh, Ino-chan? Laughed Naruto in a jovially sarcastic tone. Okay, now you're just rubbing it in, you jerk. Scolded the platinum blonde girl playfully with a smirk as she began picking herself up off the ground with the thankful help from her male trainer. Haha, alright, I'll lay off. Smiled the blue-eyed boy as he gently helped Ino regain her bearings. Looking to the sky with a thoughtful look, he added, you know it's past noon and I haven't had anything to eat all day. How about it? Lunch is on me. Are you kidding? Now that I'm off that stupid diet and after going through this insane boot camp of yours, I intend to put you into the poorhouse, tough guy. Scoffed the teal-eyed girl as she jokingly poked her index finger at the chest of a sheepishly grinning Naruto. With a clap of finality, he cheered at a girl. Now that's what I like to hear. So where to? Lady's choice. Well, I did hear of this place a few blocks from here called Ichi something or other. I hear they have really good ramen and dumplings. Shrugged Ino, as she explained her reasons matter-of-factly. She turned to see how Naruto felt about the suggestion to see him with a glazed euphoric look on his face. Naruto-kun. Are you there? Finished Ino, snapping her fingers in front of her fellow blonde to get any kind of response. You like ramen? Asked the blonde Sarutobi in a stunned trance-like tone. Well yay, the veggie kind is a pretty good and I haven't had it in a while. Ino never got to finish before the loud and enthusiastic voice of Naruto cut her off as he pulled the flushed girl into a joyful hug. Yes. This is the start of a beautiful friendship, Ino-chan. I just know it. Yay, definitely best of friends, yup, friends. Answered the blushing girl, muttering the final words out in quiet melancholy. Tree-line adjacent to the training grounds. No words were being exchanged between the shrouded man and his two equally featureless subordinates, but the subtle communication was there. Working together for years had allowed these three to sync up with literally every aspect of their personalities, almost to a point of near telepathy. Some would say battle is the best way for people to truly understand one another to this level. Of course, being of the same clan can do that too, so it would be no surprise that leader's thoughts were almost mirrored by the other two, with just about the same inflection of judgment and observation. Despite the distance of his quarry, he was able to glean what was being spoken between him and the Yamanaka girl, and was not thrilled with the unplanned turn of events that his mission was taking. Interesting. At the rate in which the boy was training, I would have suspected he would have exhausted himself enough for this to go much smoother with little trouble. Unfortunately, I underestimated the power of a Jinchuriki. His fortitude is staggering, he truly is the key to our future. His face contorting into an uncharacteristic frown of frustration, his thoughts continued to linger. If they return to the public areas of the village, our chances of success are cut drastically. We cannot afford to let this opportunity slip while he's isolated and unprotected, even if his resistance will still be higher than what I would have wanted. It must be done now. But that final mental note, the man turned to either side and met his cold black eyes with the same ones shared by his two comrades, who by their looks, undoubtedly came to the same conclusions as well. At the exchange of mutual nods, they leapt off in opposite directions, following through in their individual roles with the same unsaid agreement. Commence operation. Keymaster. Back with Naruto and Ino. Walking at a relaxing pace through the grounds, Naruto continued to rattle on and on about all the different wonderful flavors of ramen to Ino, who settled for nodding politely despite her strained interest in the odd topic. As they were continuing their mindless small talk, the male of the two blondes came to abrupt stop, assuming a thoughtful and serious look, as if he had just sensed something that tried to remain unseen. Naruto-kun. Is something wrong? Did you forget something? Asked Ino, concern evident in her voice at seeing the normally fun-loving boy with such a frighteningly darkened look on his face. The boy in question didn't respond and continued to dart his focused icy blue eyes around, trying to detect what his heightened senses had just barely picked up just a few seconds earlier. I know it's not my mind playing with me. It was faint, but it was there. Nah, Naruto-kun? Asked Ino again, this time with a tone drenched in worry. The boy again didn't give an answer as he raised his face to the air and began sniffing, much like his dog-loving friend. Cursing as he caught some unfamiliar scents, Naruto flicked his arms down in a quick motion, releasing the hidden mechanisms on his wrists that were now holstering his trenched knives. The scowling, blue-eyed Sarutobi swiftly grasped his weapons as they were dropped from his sleeves and brought them up into a generic defensive kenjutsu stance, ignoring the shocked yelp of his female companion by his sudden actions. By now, Ino was literally pleading with the boy to answer her. With a swift and abrupt SHHH from Naruto, the teal-eyed girl went silent but still held a foreboding look as she too began frantically looking around for what could make someone as skilled as her fellow blonde this on edge. The blonde boy in question focused his grim thoughts more on the developing situation. 2, maybe 3, and they're definitely hostile if the cloak and dagger is anything to go by. All highly skilled Chunin, possibly Jonin, definitely not good, especially with Ino-chan here. There's no way she can defend herself against that skill level. And with this many I'd be hard-pressed to fend them off too, damn it, there's nothing I can do till they make the first move. Naruto didn't need to wait long for that to happen before the familiar projectile whistle of kunai was heard coming from 3 equilateral directions all around himself and Ino. Narrowing his icy, focused eyes at the clearly evaluationary tactic being employed by his unseen assailants, Naruto pushed wind element chakra into his knives, employing a technique originally perfected by his father. With the blade's length extended and its strength enhanced, the blue-eyed ninja began to perform swift, skilled motions with his weapons around a stunned Ino, easily deflecting and hacking each and every one of the 12 steel kunai into useless chunks of metal. Now surrounded by small irregular metal slugs, Naruto settled into a bent stance, stretching his arms out in a way similar to how a bird takes flight. Still harboring a look of complete focus and determination, the boy gave a slight smirk to his hidden attackers that clearly said, "Is that the best you got?" Ino, who in stunned shock plopped herself flat on her ass, could only stare wide-eyed at the boy in disbelief once again by the sheer skill he had just employed defending her. Hasn't this enigmatic boy still not yet graduated from the academy? How could he be this strong? Silence reigned in the wide-open grassland, enough for the subtle breeze to be heard whistling as it grazed over the blades of greenery on the ground. Naruto and Ino remained glued to their spots, unmoving, only their slow and heavy breathing indicating that they weren't statues, marking the land. In an instant, 3 blurs shot into the air, directly into the path of the sun, which kept their appearance a mystery to the 2 blondes. Naruto, who could barely make out their movements with the sun blinding him, just barely caught them performing a throwing motion, which he assumed by the unmistakable whistling sound was another volley of kunai. Preparing for a repeat of the last time, albeit with more difficulty with the blinding sun, Naruto recoiled his stance and pumped more wind chakra into his blades to begin his dance as he saw the projectiles grow near. If it wasn't for his obscured vision, he could have seen his attackers forming hand seals. Page Kunai Bunshin no Jutsu. Kunai shadow replication technique was heard shouted simultaneously by the 3 distinctly male voices of the ambushers as the rapidly approaching dozen kunai heading for the 2 academy cadets multiplied into nearly 100 deadly tools of death. Ino, who went pale seeing the sky literally become blotted out by a hail of sharpened steel, quickly shifted her gaze back to Naruto to see his course of action. To her wide-eyed horror, the blue-eyed boy flung his trench knives, his only noticeable means of defending against the attack, to the ground where they embedded themselves upright in discarded abandonment. Resigning herself to a grisly fate, the terrified girl shut her eyes and grasped her head in expectation of the pain and eventual death that was quickly approaching. If she had still been looking, she would have seen Naruto smirking as he formed a ram seal with his newly freed hands outside the entrance to Konoha General Hospital. Getting this far might not have been a cakewalk, but it was definitely worth it all in the end. Smiled Jiro as he strode at a relaxed pace through the hospital's double-door exit. Unlike his normal cocky smirk, this smile was one of genuine satisfaction, recalling the many patients he had treated in the last hour after passing his exam. Of course, one patient stood out above the rest, and despite his best efforts, he couldn't stop letting his thoughts dwell on the reminders it gave him of certain memories. Flashback 20 minutes earlier. Man, what I wouldn't give to find the half-witted nerd who designed these floors. I feel like I'm about to run into a minotaur in this fucking labyrinth. Despite his neutral and lackadaisical exterior, Jiro, internally, was mincingly annoyed by the problems he had been having trying to find the rooms for his last few patients. It seemed that despite the clearly marked directions adorning every wall, he felt he was being mocked by how generic they were in outlining which rooms were encompassed in certain areas. Of course, if you had tried to find room 521 among brackets of cross-thatched hallways that contained rooms 500 to 560 in non-sequential order, you had a better time of finding God than you did finding the right room. Oh thank you baby Jesus, room 411. Sure, why wouldn't it be between 410 and 412, that would be just silly, thought Jiro sarcastically as he dragged his hand over his face to erase the scowl that found its way along his travels. Hearing the muffled coughing of a young girl, the red-eyed boy grimaced, hearing the very strained breathing and respiratory inconsistency, even with the door closed. Even without doing any tests, the young Saratobi knew enough from his drill training of what the girl had. "Ah, pneumonia, you vicious bitch. Snared your talons into a young lady I see," and with that final thought, Jiro entered into the room to see a very ill auburn-haired girl, of maybe 3 years of age, being fed a glass of water from her young, and very fretful, mother, a ninja if her chunin fatigues were of any indication. Made aware of the new arrival into her daughter's exam room, the brown-haired mother turned to address the red-eyed boy with a look of confusion. "Oh hello young man. I'm sorry, you must have been given the wrong room, this one's currently being occupied." Finishing her address with a smile to save face at his obvious mistake. Nope, room 411. Hirakira Janasha. Complaints of chest pains and trouble breathing. Heavy coughing with mild signs of blood in her mucus, recited Jiro casually as he perused the highlights of his clipboard of the ailment currently afflicting the young toddler. "Wait. How do you have my daughter's medical chart? Where's her doctor?" shrieked the now confused and angered woman. "I'm right here of course," smirked Jiro cheekily. But you're just a kid. My daughter is miserably ill and they sent a boy to treat her. Hey now, I turned 13 this past May. Technically I'm a teenager." Jiro's smirk transformed into a full-blown grin following that retort. He was just having too much fun with this. Ignoring the continuing screeching from the pair of lungs called the girl's mothers, Jiro strode over to the ill child and in an unusually kind and compassionate tone for him anyway, greeted, "Hello cutie. My name is Jiro. What's yours?" He may have already known her name, but treating a patient was more than tossing a bottle of pills at someone. My name is Jay Janasha. It's nice to meet you Jiro-san." answered Janasha in quite possibly the most adorable way Shiro had ever seen. Stuttering from a 3-year-old will do that. Excuse me? I'm not done talking to you. Despite the mother's continued boisterous rantings, Shiro ignored her and continued to put his full attention on the task at hand. That's a very pretty name, princess. Smiled the young medic as he elicited a choked giggle from the little girl as he softly pinched her nose. Well, little Haim, I'm here to make all your ouchies go away. But I'm gonna need your help finding them all, okay? With his answer being a series of cute and rapid nods, Shiro smiled at her and performed a minor hand seal for a diagnostic jutsu. Don't you dare ignore me. What are you doing? Cried the woman, who was about to reach for a kunai in her holster until she paused in shock to see Shiro begin performing medical ninjutsu that she didn't expect the young boy to actually know. Medical ninjutsu that she had only seen someone of her rank perform in the field. How? There's no way somebody his age could possess the control needed for that technique. So little one. How about you tell your Nai-san what your favorite food is asked Shiro in a comforting tone, using his best bedside skills to take Janasha's attention away from him performing his diagnostic. I likes to eat sea cake with icy cream. Mommy gots me a lot of chocolate kind because I have the Uchiha in my throat and it makes it feel a better. Chirped the little girl, showing distinct difficulty in her breathing as she spoke. The alveoli are definitely inflamed, but luckily there's no major scarring and the bronchial tubes doesn't appear to be SARS, so that's good. Thought Shiro as he continued to pulse chakra into the girl's body through his hand to identify the contagions and the damage they had caused. All the while, he kept his attention on the girl, smiling and acknowledging everything she was telling him. That sounds really good. Your mommy sounds like a really nice lady and will do anything she can to help you get better as soon as possible. At this statement, the red-eyed medic did a minor glance towards the ninja mother and smirked at her sheepish expression. At the young mother's nod of apologetic acknowledgement, Shiro focused back on his tiny patient. Looks to be just a simple bacterial version, man. It's a good thing I prepped a few inoculations yesterday. If not, the poor kid would have gotten worse before I had the time to whip some up. And after these closing thoughts, the young medic cut off his diagnostic and grinned warmly at the poor wheezing child. You know what? I'm willing to bet that you like magic, don't you? Asked Shiro enthusiastically. At this question, the little girl immediately perked up. Replied Janasha with hopeful eyes. I knew that you would, because, and at the same time as he reached behind the little girl's right ear, he used his other free hand to procure the prepared inoculator from his hip satchel. The girl's mother had tensed slightly after taking notice of this action, but relaxed when she felt that her earlier lack of faith in this young medical ninja was misplaced and refused to do it again. Whoa. Big money. And with a flick of the wrist, he produced a large golden chocolate coin from behind her ear as he used the sleight of hand distraction to painlessly administer the drug into the giggling and awed Janasha. Wow. How'd you do that? Asked the impressed toddler as she began to tear into the chocolatey treat. It was magic, of course. Laughed Shiro as he ruffled the girl's auburn hair. Improvement in her breathing was already noticeable with the absence and hesitation in her speaking. And just like any 3-year-old who receives anything messy to eat, the girl looked back up with a face covered in dark chocolate smears to smile thankfully at the Sarutobi boy. The appearance of her adorably unkempt face though had a very different effect on young Shiro, who suddenly donned a very haunted look. Flashback 6 years ago. It hurts, Nai-san, make it stop, croaked a 4-year-old girl, tears of immense pain running down the horribly black and bulbous disfigurements jutting throughout her innocent face. A familiar boy of 7 years of age looked on with wide, shell-shocked eyes, horrified at the form of what was once a healthy child. Silent tears poured from his crimson eyes looking into the agonized and desperate ones that belonged to a girl he had never met before but would most likely never forget. I don't know how was all he could choke out in between his own sobs. Then flashback. Ro-san. Shiro-san. The concerned calls from Janasha's mother had finally broken through the young medic's near catatonic expression, eliciting Shiro to blink a few times and then smile back to hide the dredged-up emotion from that memory. Are you alright? Questioned the woman with a concern not expected by Shiro after the initial abrasiveness of their meeting earlier. Well, Hirakira-san, I think Janasha here will be fine in a week or so. The young medic's obvious change of topic did not go unnoticed to the experienced Chunin. However, having recognized that look Shiro had earlier pasted on the faces of plenty of her comrades, she used her best judgment not to press the issue any further. The clearly more subdued red-eyed Sarutobi reached into his hip satchel once again, producing 6 additional inoculation capsules and a fresh hypo spray injector. While handing them to her, he listed his instructions with a clinical voice. Make sure she receives 1 injection every morning, starting tomorrow. If you miss just one, it will prolong the pneumonia even more, requiring additional doses. And make sure to soak the injector in alcohol after every dose. Even though you can reuse it, if it's not sanitized properly it could give her an infection. With a relieved and grateful look, the woman replied, "Thank you, Shiro-san. And I'm sorry about earlier, I didn't mean to doubt you." "She's my little girl," and well trailed off the Hirakira woman, looking away with a tinge of shame for her biased doubts. "No biggie. I mean, if I was in your position and some preteen goon showed up claiming to know how to do complex medical procedures when my kid's health's at stake, well, I would probably raise all kinds of hell," replied the medic ninja, waving off the woman's unnecessary apology. Sharing a final farewell with the appreciative mother and kindly handing a healthier-looking Janasha another chocolate coin for the road, Shiro exited the procedure room and shook his head to clear the mental cobwebs from his episode earlier before turning to find the next patient on his list. Then flashback. "I wonder if I'll ever get over it," muttered young Shiro as he dragged his hand over his face in psychological exhaustion. "Well, at least the nightmares aren't as bad anymore, I guess that's an improvement," chuckled the medic without an ounce of mirth usually associated with such an action. As he continued walking through the settling streets, Shiro tensed slightly, following it up with an audible sigh. With clear frustration written across his face, the dark-haired boy crossed his arms and turned to lean on the nearest building in an expectant way. "Either your concealment skills suck or you want me to find you," chided the red-eyed boy, seemingly to nobody in particular. Just as suddenly as the last word left his mouth, an armored ninja in a mask hummed into existence, seemingly out of nowhere. "A simple test of your detection skills, Sarutobi-sama. I am impressed that you found me as quickly as you did, even if I was not utilizing maximum efficiency. Even so, I expected no less from the grandson of our Lord Hokage," stated the now visible Anbu ninja in a calm yet mechanical voice, his only observable characteristics being his long black hair, stylized weasel mask, and collected posture. "Well, I appreciate the flattery, Anbu-san," snorted Shiro. "I'm tired, hungry and feel like shit, so if you don't mind cutting to the chase, I would appreciate it," finished the boy in a clearly irritated tone. The young medic's eyes narrowed, however, as the Anbu turned his mask to the side, revealing a cold and indifferent face in possession of a pair of fully evolved 3-tomo Sharingan eyes. "Then I shall make this quick. Confines of the Uchiha clan lord's estate study chambers. Have you lost what little sanity you have left? This is madness, Fugaku." From his prone meditative position within his private study, Uchiha Fugaku lazily opened one of his piercing onyx eyes to bore into the soul of his subordinate while addressing the man's concerns in a very Uchiha-like way. "I don't care much for your tone, Shinra, dare I say it feels confrontational." The visible flinch by one Uchiha Shinra spoke volumes about what he believed his fate would be if his argumentative tirade continued in this fashion towards the man who held all the power within his family. Despite the ever-growing doubt that has been creeping in his mind since news reached his ears about his clan leader's abrupt change in plans regarding the capture of the Nine-Tailed Jinchuriki, one Sarutobi Naruto, the simple fact remained that to disrespect the man even the slightest would equal a swift death. And that's if the man wasn't in the mood to prolong your suffering. I mean no disrespect, my lord, but have you really considered what we are doing? To abduct the Jinchuriki this soon is obscenely reckless," replied the buzz-shaven-headed, heavily tattooed Shinra, who began with a submissive tone which grew in ferocity by its conclusion. Opening his second soul-piercing eye, the clan head focused all of his energy into a regal calmness despite his growing bloodlust to end the life of the weak-minded fool before him. "I consider every step I take is with the calculated precision of a true champion of the Uchiha," declared Fugaku, and with practiced fluid grace ascended to his feet, taking slow methodical steps toward his now slightly unnerved underling. "That is why I lead this clan and not you." His concluding statement coming out hiss-like as he stood not 1 foot from his insubordinate kinsman. "I did not come here to challenge your title, nor of how you earned it." Despite the scare tactics, Shinra was not about to admit more frailty in front of his leader and rebuilt his resolve to continue with renewed intensity. "But even you must realize that pushing ahead with our plans this thoughtlessly will put us in ruin. Deadlines must be met, Shinra. I care not for the consequences so long as there are results. I expect nothing less. The Jinchuriki is a key component for the invasion and we cannot afford the chance Sarutobi will try hiding him again, only this time beyond our influence. We must acquire him now," replied Fugaku, leaving no room in his tone for further argument lest things turn ugly. Despite the hidden warning of finality in the other man's tone, Shinra pushed on unfazed. "The boy is under clan protection and almost constant guard. The Hokage is already suspicious of us, and if the boy goes missing, we'll be finished before we even get started." Feeling the need for something to soothe his growing irritation, the Stoic clan head slowly walked to his left to a nearby pot of herbal tea, and while pouring himself a cup, he responded curtly, "The old monkey knows nothing, and I will guarantee that it will remain as such." Pausing midway to take a dainty sip of his tea, Fugaku continued, "But then I wonder, dear little brother." At this, he turned his gaze back toward said brother and in an deliberately accusative tone finished, "How would you know so much about what he knows, Damn you." At this a mere whisper. his body shaking with unbidden repressed rage. The veritable calm before the storm. Drhh, damn you. You dare imply I betrayed my own blood, I would no sooner hand over my eyes to the thrice-damned Cloud Village. His fear be damned, he wasn't about to let his Uchiha pride be torn apart this bastard's accusations. Family or not. And yet I find myself doubting those words. Not much ever gets past these eyes of mine. Shinra at this, Fugaku raised his free left hand in a claw-like vice over his left eye. As he slowly lowered it, his eyes flashed to that of a fully evolved 3-tomo Sharingan to add to the intimidating effect his statement had. You would be wise to remember it. Even if it was something Shinra himself possessed, the sight of the Sharingan in its final stage directed toward him still created the reflexive flinch of fear. Realizing that his clan head's pig-headed desires were beyond reason at this point for further discussion, coupled with the open declaration of suspicion that he was a traitor to his own clan, losses needed to be cut before they continued mounting during this very one-sided discussion. As they say, it's time to get the fuck out of Dodge. Very well my lord, I apologize for my rudeness, I shall take my leave. And with this final concession, Shinra made a small bow followed by an about face towards the door, hoping to leave without further incident. Sadly, this was not to be. One last thing, Shinra, the said man, paused in mid-step, if by some grace of luck, you somehow managed to deceive me, I doubt our true benefactor would be so easily fooled. Nor would he be so forgiving. With his final hanging threat, Fugaku took another small sip of his tea and pause, followed by a dismissive wave. Now you may leave. Training Ground 22. Ino and Naruto. Taifuten. Taifunum. Greater wind release. Eye of the Typhoon. Shooting his arms out in a protective motion, young Sarutobi Naruto literally roared out the name of his technique, expressing every emotion he has invested in not only protecting himself, but also the young lady in his charge. First came the silence. Then in the blink of an eye, the impending barrage of kunai was met with the raw unbidden fury of a massive chakra-enhanced cyclone that had formed protectively around Naruto and Ino. Twisting and flowing, tearing and slicing. Dirt, grass and stone being torn from the ground and shot out at blaring velocities, impacting on trees and barrier stones about the training area. The shifting tremor about the area from the expenditure of such power. Utter chaos, yet summoned under full control. The howling shrieks of the razor-sharp air blades colliding with the tempered steel was so loud and shrill that the terrified screams of young Yamanaka Ino were muted silent by contrast. The knives themselves were shredded apart, becoming useless hunks of steel before being hurled outward in a spray of flak. Then in a flourish, our young blonde hero swept his outstretched arms in a sharp downward motion, which in turn caused the remaining rotational wind that had built up to thrust outward in dissipation. The only thing left at ground zero was a hunched over and slightly panting Naruto, and a prone and whimpering Ino atop an untouched circular patch of grass, surrounded by an expanse of upturned grooved and scarred soil. Landing in identical prone crouches, the three Uchiha antagonists could only stand wide-eyed before the sheer devastation wrought in retaliation to their tandem attack. It was expected for a demon vessel to perform at a higher tier of ability through the use of their prisoner's power. But that's just it, that power was entirely the boy's, nothing borrowed. It was completely the boy's own talent. Such a thing shouldn't be possible, but yet it was. Further musings were cut short by the sound of distressed mumbling amongst the tense silence. Still kneeling prone, choking in air and emotionally induced adrenaline exhaustion, the now wide-eyed Yamanaka Ino had just finally registered that her existence was not wiped out like she thought it would. I am alive. Pausing to inhale in a labored shudder, she began checking her body for any kind of wounds or marring only to find none. She was further shocked to find that she was completely unharmed. But how? Drawn from her open musing, she caught the amused chuckle of the boy who was clearly responsible for protecting her, if the fact his body was still in a hunched shielding stance in front of her. Heh. Geez, I almost feel insulted, Ino-chan. At this, Naruto recovered from his slouched position, where he straightened into a normal posture. From there, he flicked a small mechanism attached to his wrist, which in turn retracted wires attached to his trench knives, bringing said weapons back into the grasp of their wielder. A resounding clink being the only sound being made. What? You think I'd let these fucktards lay a finger on that pretty head of yours? Feh, not a chance. At this, our blonde hero partially turned his head to offer the frightened girl a small grin and a wink. All the stunned young girl could do was blush prettily. Schooling his features from warmth to ice, he turned his focus back onto his three attackers and began to observe each one with calculating eyes. The leftmost of the three was a short man, maybe just reaching a hair taller than himself. Physically he was unremarkable by ninja standards and simply came across as being athletically average. His clothing was mostly the same as the others, a typical Konoha Chunin's garb, the only defining characteristic being a pair of tantos holstered in an X formation across his back. Sporting what many would call a feminine hairstyle, his long raven hair was totally parted to the left side of his head and face and was held in a long, tightly bound ponytail that draped forward across his shoulder and chest. With very thin cat-like eyes and pouty lips, the man literally had the appearance of a woman's face grafted onto a man's body. Naruto inwardly choked on some bile after drawing that conclusion. Doubt chills will do that. The man holding position on the far right was literally Lefty's polar opposite. He was nearly 2 heads taller and significantly wider in build, much more like a bodybuilder rather than a ninja. He wore no top underneath his flak vest, opting to keep his tree trunk-like arms unobstructed from clothing. Held in his hand while also resting on his shoulder was what appeared to be a solid steel warhammer. From its 5-foot shaft to its massive rectangular cudgel, it looked to be incredibly destructive, if incredibly impractical. Obvious compensation, as far as Naruto was concerned. No wonder he works out so much. The man's head was also clean-shaven and sported some incredibly detailed runic tattoos over both his scalp as well as certain parts of his face. The most surprising thing though was the man's expression. Unlike the unreadability of the other two, this guy's face was an open book, a book into a fucking nightmare. From his massive sanity challenge grin to his wide-open psychotic eyes, you know, the kind where the pupil never touches the edge of the eyelid, the man's expression screamed hair trigger waiting to fuck shit up. This dude's a goddamn brick shithouse stocked with napalm and nitro. Jesus Christ. Then, there was Leader, and this guy looked every bit the part. His stance, his aura, his expression, literally everything about his outward appearance was in full control. If he didn't want you to see it, goddammit, you wouldn't see it. His clothing, again, just the simple garb of a typical Konoha chunin. And unlike the previous two, Naruto couldn't pinpoint any kind of unique weaponry. At least any the man wanted you to see. Then again, the possibility that Hess not as hands-on like the others appear to be is possible as well. Besides a messy mass of wavy raven hair held back by his hideate, the rest of his face was complete ice. The eyes were half-lidded and expressionless, possessing highly pronounced lashes not quite feminine, but much longer than a normal male's. With an even mouth and unflinching facial structure, this guy's face was a poker player's worst nightmare made reality. If the asshole wasn't trying to kill me, I'd run him through Tanzaku and make a mint. But of course, the most glaring aspect of all three that really got Naruto's attention. Wait for it, Ann. 3 pairs of spinning Sharingan eyes. Fuck you. I love puns, Ann. Uchiha. Why would they be after me and Ino? This doesn't make any sense. Fuck right now, the why doesn't matter. I need to get her out of here somehow. Graw. Think goddammit. Naruto wasn't the only one in this showdown facing an internal dilemma. Realizing his glaring tactical underestimation of his prey, the Uchiha squad captain was mulling over the new data, trying to piece together a new tactic now that the element of surprise had been lost. This boy's ability is much more formidable than was forecasted by our spies. This is proving to be quite irritating. I am still too far out of range, and it appears the boy's skillset makes any attempt at close quarters combat suicidal at best. But he is still young, his lack of practical experience being his one major disadvantage. If we can lull him with misdirection, we can pierce his defenses bit by bit until we close the gap, giving me the window I need to initiate my submission technique. Subtly, the captain darted his eyes to the shaken Yamanaka girl. Fortunately, the current situation is not without a solution. Feeling that the standoff had reached its tolerable limit, Naruto decided to get the ball rolling in his typical blunt trademarked fashion. Hey. Fucknut Uchiha bastards. How about you enlighten me, eh? What do you want? At the mention of Uchiha, Ino's eyes shot up, only to flinch back down at the sight their frightening crimson gazes. Oh holy shit. Why is the Uchiha clan after us? Aren't they supposed to be the police? Naruto's question never received an answer. Just 2 impassive faces and 1 psychotic one staring right back at him. Not even a flinch. For a clan of fire tamers, they do a damn good impression of ice cubes. Let's dial the conversation up a notch and see if I can't make one blink. What? Did Sasuke-chan send some of his whipped bitch clansmen to get one over on me after dusted his ass at school? Aw, poor baby got himself a boo-boo, and you're here to make it I better huh? And to emphasize his point, the blonde boy pouted and dragged his index finger down the corner of his eye, mocking tears. Following this comment, Naruto smirked at the small, yet noticeable, rise in direct killing intent being focused his way. He inwardly laughed seeing the burly one's eye twitch, ever so slightly. Cue the thought bubble with a chibi Naruto rubbing his hands together maniacally. Good god. One more push is all they need before they pop. Muhahaha. Ugh, Shiro was right, I do get off by pissing people off. I really need a girlfriend. Stifling a sudden urge to sneeze, Ino whispered to Naruto apprehensively, Naruto. Can you maybe try not to piss off the bloodthirsty hitmen please? Without turning around, Naruto whispered his reply. Hey, don't worry. Piss them off and they get sloppy. Basic shinobi principle. I've got this. Addressing the Uchiha once again, Naruto took on a mock-thinking pose. "Hey, speaking of your little golden boy, I just realized something." At this he waved his hand in address to the three Uchiha, with strapping young bucks like yourselves at his beck and call. No wonder he doesn't acknowledge the hordes of girls who have been trying to get in his pants. Here he paused for dramatic effect. "So do you take turns swallowing?" By now the bloodlust had risen to stifling levels, especially from the big dude, whereas one blonde had doubled over in sheer panic and terror, the other grinned in triumph. "Score. Still got it. Just gotta keep them focused on me. Now if I time this right, I might be able to knock one out of the game right off the bat too if I'm really lucky." And so far they haven't taken notice yet. Reaching his wit's end, listening to Naruto undermine his sexual preferences, the hammer-wielding brute of the three snarled, "Grahh. Enough of this foolishness. Listen and listen well, Nine Tails." At this point he pointed the head of his hammer directly and the blonde boy, "You are coming with us whether you wish to or not. These are the terms. There is no negotiation. No bargaining. Nothing." At this, the blonde Jinchuriki simply scoffed and crossed his arms while smirking with closed eyes. Mentally though, the statement had shaken him up a bit. It was becoming a lot clearer now what they were after and Naruto didn't like it. "He called me Nine Tails. This is bad. Really bad. The village was told the Kyuubi vessel had been dead all these years, so nobody would get suspicious of me and stick me on the chopping block. How the hell did they find out even more? Why are they trying to take me alive instead of outright trying to annihilate me?" Ino had her own thoughts as well. Nine Tails? Is that like a nickname or title or something? And why are they after him? At this train of thought, she looked up toward the enigmatic boy in front of her. "Just who are you, Naruto?" Sensing that forward demands wouldn't appeal to the boy, the femme-faced one decided some bargaining might be worth the attempt. After all, unlike his squad mates, he had always believed compassion and mercy could provide expedient results. "Let's not be so hasty now." The man began in a monotonous yet soft tone, "If you do come willingly, I promise you I will make sure to end the girl's life quickly and painlessly." At this, Naruto's eyes shot wide open and then narrowed intensely towards the ambiguously gendered Uchiha. The man in question, not realizing his error, continued, "Now please. Do not fight with us. If you attempt to resist, I will prolong her suffering to an unthinkable level and make sure you watch every single moment. All the while knowing you were the cause. You have 10 seconds to comply." Yes, was he not merciful? By now, Ino was taking in short, hyperventilated breaths, all the while tearing up and fried at the promised fate she had just overheard from that sociopath. However, that wasn't the only reaction the man's statement got. By now Naruto's playful mirth had completely left him. Nothing was left but the enraged visage and glowing ice blue eyes of a man possessed with the intent to maim, kill, and destroy. This was no longer a game anymore. In a tone haggard with repressed seething anger, Naruto responded slowly and methodically, "You sons of bitches seriously have no idea what kind of hell I am going to bring down on you for threatening her like that. Absolutely no idea." It was at this time, the leader spoke up curtly and apathetically. "It was not a threat. Her death is logically required. We cannot leave witnesses to speak of these events. The means of silencing her all depends on your level of cooperation, boy." By now, the young Yamanaka had collapsed to her knees in hysterics, unable to control the growing terror in hearing trained killers promising to end her life. Finding herself choking in between breaths, she almost missed the caring and comforting reassurances being whispered her way. "Ino-chan, listen to me." Calm. By now the girl's spirit was shattering as her body was racking in sobs. "Ino, please, you need to calm down. Relax and breathe slowly." At this, Ino had slowed her tears enough to allow Naruto to continue. "Now look at me." With the request heard, Ino slowly complied and raised her puffy red eyes to see Naruto still facing forward, but with his gaze focused on her from the corners of his eyes. "I swear to you they won't come within 5 feet of you. I will protect you at all costs. This I promise, so help me God." The firmness of his words and the determined look in his eyes gave the girl pause in order to fully digest what she heard. This boy, no, this young man had in every definition of the word swore an oath of protection for her well-being. With most of her experience dealing with the opposite sex being constant disappointment and utter rejection, this kind of devotion to her safety was incredibly foreign. After all, despite her dreams of fulfilling her potential of becoming a strong practitioner of the shinobi arts, becoming an instrument of combat capable of ensuring her own continued survival, she, like any little girl, had always quietly wished for that fairy tale moment a white knight came to her rescue. For a while, she believed that, because of his strength and skill, Sasuke could have been that knight. Such a stupid idealistic fantasy, and yet, that thought of the raven-haired boy slammed her back into reality. Flashbacks of that moment during lunch, the cold red eyes of the Sharingan scoffing at her existence, the heat of the fireball technique bearing down on her, the feeling of complete hopelessness in surviving. And now, here she was, facing three Uchiha who, without a doubt, have far more talent and ability than the former object of her affections ever could. Even with someone as skilled as Naruto, the situation just seemed completely hopeless. But these are three highly trained ninja we're talking about. Uchiha elite no less. Even you can't fight off this many. To actually hear herself openly accept this, to accept her own demise, was the final push needed to crumble her resolve and shatter her spirit. Oh god I don't wanna die not, yet the words were choked out in hysterics as the poor broken girl began shaking and held herself in desperate search of comfort. While the tone wasn't malicious, the sudden shock from Naruto's yell snapped the girl out of her fit long enough for her to hear the boy continue in a softer, more pleading voice. Please trust me. Part of Ino wanted to doubt him, thinking some odds were just too high to overcome. After all, in what crazy universe would it be possible for an academy student to successfully defend against three elite fully fledged ninjas? But the conviction in his tone. The unwavering in his stance. The fire in his eyes. Maybe just this once, she would bet the farm on the underdog. With renewed hope in her eyes, she lifted her gaze and in a shaky yet firm tone, responded. I trust you. Enough of this sappy bullshit. The moment was hastily cut off by the shout of burly Uchiha. The time for talk has ended. It is clear you won't be coming willingly. Added the leader in a chilling tone. But that being said, all of Naruto's attackers assumed their respective attack stances. The feminine-faced ninja unsheathed his dual swords and flipped them expertly into a reverse grip, all the while softening his features into a gleeful yet cocky smirk. At the same time, the hammer-wielding one simply widened his stance while slamming the electrically charged butt of his hammer into his other hand, grinning wildly in anticipation. The leader he didn't move at all. Prepare yourself you little bastard. Snarled the larger man. Lowering his head, where his eyes became hidden behind his bangs, Naruto simply smirked and replied in a low tone. DCH already was you fool. Proc. Boom. With the sudden explosion, time began to move at a snail's pace for the three men. Almost in the blink of an eye, three duplicate Narutos had erupted from the ground behind the boys' attackers, each one charging furiously toward an individual Uchiha, not but a few feet away. Rasengan. Spiraling sphere. Was the tandem cry of the shadow clones, each wielding an orb of condensed rotating chakra in one of their hands. The technique of the fourth impossible. Was the unanimous thought of all three Uchiha upon seeing and hearing the name of the attack. With absolutely no time to think, instincts, the kind one can only get from countless years of practical experience, kicked in providing an escape for two of the would-be victims of the ambush. The telltale pops of substitutions resonated above the whirling pulse of two of the Rasengans, just as said attacks collided with the standard replacement tree stumps set in their path. Said stumps were completely obliterated, along with the shadow clones delivering the attacks, as the orbs of chakra detonated into two massive shrieking vortexes. Within a split second after arriving on a nearby branch, behind some dense tree foliage, the leader and the hammer giant whipped their heads around, only to see their lagging squad mate cockily scoff and assume a cross-sword protection stance in anticipation of his own attacker. The audible hum of chakra surrounding and reinforcing the blades indicated the man's plan in defending against the barrage. The brutish one however caught on and knew this was a terrible idea and tried voicing it as such. Unrashi you idiot. Don't try to block it. The warning was completely ignored. Sharingan eyes locked on in preparation and anticipation as the feminine man smirked and called out, Kinjutsu Aogi. Jugi no Igo. Sacred sword art. Protection of the cross. The charging clone, in a furious growl, only had this to shout as he thrusted the Rasengan in his hand forward. Ha! Not happening pretty boy. The whirling, densely packed chakra within the orb soon met with the much more thinly channeled river of chakra in the center of the crossed blades. The massive unholy screeching of chakra grinding on chakra tore across the field as the two techniques met in their battle of supremacy. A very one-sided battle. Considering his look of confident assurance, the defensive technique might have been highly successful for the man in the past, defending against various other projectiles and offensive jutsu. However, that look soon turned to wide-eyed shock, seeing the sudden snap of his blades, followed by the horrific sight of his torso being turned into ground beef. Only one thing crossed his mind before excruciating pain shot through it, the realization that no defense is ever unbreakable. Naya. Screamed the man, as his body became engulfed within a localized orb of chaotic chakra energy that itself soon propelled forward like a spinning rocket toward the tree line. Shoom. Snap. Crash. Snap. Kriaik. After colliding through three trees, the man's body finally met resistance on the fourth with a resounding snap of flesh and bone against bark. With a blank look of shock, pain and defeat, the man's body slumped forward limply as his now bare upper body bled from the massive damage it received. The shadow clone responsible gingerly walked up to the fallen man and with a wide grin he bent down and jammed his finger in the unconscious man's face. Mine, you got knocked the fuck out. And then promptly dispersed. Back at the clearing. Naruto and Ino. With no sign of the other two that managed to escape his ambush, Naruto schooled his features while his eyes darted in every direction, looking for any kind of immediate counterattack. HMPH. That damn precognition ability of the Sharingan is a real pain in the ass. With the element of surprise, I thought I coulda at least got two of them with that combo. They even pulled off seal-less Kawarimi no Jutsus, substitution techniques, too. Realizing his eyes were useless with all the foliage, he stretched out with his other senses, hoping to catch the wavering chakra bleed via the replacement they performed something all ninja techniques caused a person to expel via tenketsu, no matter how small or controlled. After all, it was how he found them in the first place. However, it would seem these men weren't going to make the same mistake twice. This time there was nothing to detect. They had almost perfectly masked their chakra signature and the residual bleed. No doubt about it, these guys aren't fucking around anymore. Then Naruto. Hearing his name, he directed some of his attention to the young girl, who he noticed was still staring wide-eyed at the trench turf caused by his combination attacks. What the hell was that? I've never heard of a technique like that. Naruto also noted that, while his pep talk from earlier made a remarkable improvement in calming her down, he could still see a slight tremble in her body from all the excitement she just witnessed. Let's just say, when we get out of this here, Ino made eye contact with Naruto, whose smirking face was half turned. I've got a whole lot of explaining to do. Feeling a little brave, Ino guffawed amusingly, you're goddamn right you do.